Welcome back to the channel. I have wonderful Derri here with me today because we are both Dungeon Crawler Carl, mega super fans, and I have not really had a chance to do any spoiler talking about the series to anyone. So welcome, Derri, and yeah, how are you doing today?
I am so excited. I have been wanting desperately to talk to somebody about this series pretty much since, I don't know, September, because I started, like, the first time I picked up Dungeon Crawler Carl was August of last year. And I can honestly say that with the audio release of This Inevitable Ruin just this last sort of week, I'm now on having read the whole series or listened to the whole series about 5 times since August. I've
Nice.
had it pretty much on repeat. I have fallen so in love with this series, and nobody
Yes.
else will gush with me.
Yes,
So
I
so
will. I'll
excited
gush
when
with
you
you.
said, "Oh,
I will gush with you. This is a great
yay!"
time to get into DCC because
Oh,
book 7.
yes.
So I think he has a plan for kind of 10 books for the series,
Ooh.
and we just had book 7 release, and in audio, if you're doing it by audio, book 7 just came out with the wonderful Jeff Hayes audiobook,
Oh,
and we have trad hardcovers that are also the first 3 are out, and the next 3 are going to release over the next bunch of months. And so that's
that's so
exciting, to get into it with. If you want these hardcovers for the shelf, they got some cool color schemes. And
2 seconds, I have to let the cat out.
yeah, no worries.
You shitted. Come on.
Oh, we have a real life Princess Donut. Hello, Rogue. How's life? What are you reading? So I am actually rereading right now.
Sorry.
Book 7. Oh, no worries. I'm in the middle of a book 7 reread through the audio. I first did it on print last month, and now I'm experiencing all over again by audio. I'm almost done with it, actually. I got a little bit longer to go. And I got into this series at the very end of 2023, and just basically listened to the first.
So long.
Yeah. I listened to the first 6 books in one just frenzy of a binge in a few weeks, and I'm like, I'm not ready to let this go. Let me just put on repeat and do it again. So I did it twice through, and then for the whole year where I was waiting for book 7, I was getting that itch, and I was so excited. And as we got closer, I'm like, I can't wait any longer. I went into my kind of third listen to it all. Except this time
it all head.
I did it more in print because I had these hardcovers, and that was fun. I must say, it's fun to do it in print and just experience it a little differently and catch more details I might have missed as I was zooming through the audios. So it's
easier
to
catch
cool.
Repeat things when you eyeball it.
But, yeah,
because I'm the geek, and I was showing you before we went live. I was taking notes initially, and I've got pages of different color inks as I've gone through. Next read, I'm like, oh, actually, write that down, and it is a different experience doing to eyeball it and then to listen, and they're both amazing.
I mean, they are. Yeah, this series is blowing up in popularity, I think, a lot because of Jeff Hayes' audios, but it's the writing. Like, I've actually tried listening to a few.
Wasn't a good story, it would suck.
I've tried a few Jeff Hayes audiobooks that were not DCC, and I could not get into them at all.
Oh, okay.
Like, this is just the perfect marriage of incredibly clever, smart, emotionally deep story writing with Jeff Hayes' performance, and what he adds to it, it just brings it to life in a magnificent way. And even when I was reading it in print, I was able to imagine the Jeff Hayes audio, so that helps me in print too.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got some people here. I don't know if Zamar has started DCC yet, but it's okay. We're in no spoilers for the time being. We're spoiler free. The Rogue is reading one of my favorite books of all time. Love to see you clicking with it. And we have Eternal Clad. And yes, I also love this shirt.
I'm really jealous of your shirt. I'm so jealous of your shirt.
Dinnaman was at the Dragonsteel convention, and I knew I was
jealous.
I got my DCC. I brought book 1 to get signed by him, and I wore this shirt for that day. And he commented he loved the shirt, and he has like a a full-scale replica Princess Donut. That was great.
Oh, honestly, I mean,
Yeah.
hey, I mean, you and I got together more closely outside of Discord with Robin Hobb, and
Mm-hmm.
the difference in storytelling is chalk and cheese. I mean, you've got very slow-paced epic fantasy that kind of takes its time telling a story. It's got a relatively small cast of characters, and this that is not that. It's crazy and it's ridiculous and it is hilarious and it's silly and also emotional and also complicated. And it's one of the very rare times since I had my stroke a long time ago where it's just fallen into my head and gone, yeah, I live here. I have had zero trouble taking the story into my heart. It just basically said, no, you're going to love me. This is going to be easy. And it's just fallen in and it's locked itself in there. And I'm like, oh, I love this so much.
It's amazing how go for it. Yes, me neither.
It blew me away how many belly laughs I was getting out of that first book. Oh, it was just outrageous.
I know, but like people who haven't read it will hear this, that it's funny, that it's hilarious, that it's absurd. They'll assume that it's more of like maybe like the surrealist, absurdist kind of thing. Like I've heard people say like they're assuming going in it's more like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but it is not like that at all. I think the humor is used. The humor is used to break up the very tense drama that I think is the more dominant tone, is one of drama and found family and survival stakes. And
very much so. And that found family aspect is big. Like that's a big part of the heart of the story.
And the humor also, people, it might surprise people that it mostly doesn't stem from our main character, our POV character, Carl. Where like sometimes it often results from the way like his more serious personality interacts with others around him. But I think it's genius of Dinneman to create this entire series around Carl, who's a very serious, just like earnest type of honest, honorable, self-sacrificial type of character who and then the crazy characters are the ones around him, you know, his pet companion.
Just the most insane. And I wonder sometimes if that's why it's fallen into my brain so easily. I don't have to try and make it make sense. It's kind of supposed to not make sense, in that the most absurd things have been smushed together to make bosses. And the humor in it is, a lot of it is situational, and that it wouldn't work as a joke in any other situation, but because of the stakes and because of this crazy boss they might be fighting and the timing of whatever's being said, it just lands just so beautifully, and the characters. I love Carl. Like, I properly love Carl. I'm so attached to Carl. It is ridiculous. And the secondary characters, I mean, I'm just trying to think when we meet people. Who can I mention in book one? Ellie. Yeah, I love Ellie. She is hilarious. I mean, her character is formed in such a way that you mentally expect a kind of behavior. You expect a kind of way she's going to speak. You expect a kind of life experience to show in her voice. And that's not what you get. What you get is something very different, and that in itself is funny. And the more you get to know her, you're like, this woman, I want to be her when I grow up. She is amazing.
And she doesn't get that much page time, but like
she really doesn't, but she
what
shines.
He does to make these side characters shine with limited page time. There are some that get almost nothing, that just get briefly introduced, and I find myself attached to them, worrying about what's going to happen to them.
And you don't always know until quite a bit later, because Carl and Donut work as their own team. They do
his character work here. He's able. Dinneman's bringing to life the human characters, the non-human characters. Like it's spectacular what he's able to do with bringing all these three-dimensional, very distinctive, individual feeling characters to life, and that's amazing. But if we look past the characters, his plotting and pacing are really spectacular too. Like, there will be just these moments that each book has where they build up to this insane, tense, dramatic climax.
Oh, hugely.
And they just, it will have ripple effects for the whole rest of the series and for Carl and Donut and other characters. And we process these moments, and then, but it's not all craziness. And
There are some really beautiful, poignant moments when they take a step back and go, we are in this situation and it is crazy and we might die. And you have those moments where you kind of get reminded of the stakes here for Carl and Donut. And you're like, oh, yeah, this wouldn't work without the humor, because it would just be too hard. It would be far too difficult. So the humor makes it work. And he brings in so many aspects of this dungeon that blew me away, because I'm not familiar with the genre. You know, DCC was my first lit RPG. I don't game, so a lot of the terminology, I know I'm missing gaming references. Mm-hmm. There's no way that with all of the other references that I am getting, there is no way that there's not gaming references in this. There is going to be so many that I've just gone straight over my head. But, you know, to have given the AI the interactions that the AI has with the players, and to have the game managers and the player interfaces and the woman who does the nightly announcements. There is so many aspects to this dungeon that give Matt Dinniman a way to bring the humor, because, you know, these are alien thought processes. These are alien viewpoints on humanity. And so it's very unexpected humor, because it just comes out of nowhere. And it's very clever humor because it lands. And humor is really difficult to get right.
I'm right with you.
He does it.
And not only does the humor land, but, you know, with delivering all this kind of alien perspectives on humanity, but the way that he sets it up so that we get all these different viewpoints without even necessarily like giving different POVs, we get a few, and those
pretty much
are illuminating. But whether it's like we're zooming out to a TV interview show, and like these little bits of windows into the outside world, or interactions with you know, their publicists or lawyers and stuff, like we Dinniman slowly building out what's happening outside the dungeon to create this galactic spanning space opera and political thriller kind of element where it expands so much from initially where you think we're just in the dungeon with Carl and it's going to be a survival stakes kind of story, which it is throughout, but the way it gradually expands into this massive political, you know, sci-fantasy epic is just wonderful. And I'm loving that expansion of stakes, and also the feeling like it's almost like a sci-fi premise where it's kind of, it mixes sci-fi and fantasy where it is ridiculous kind of how, you know, the how this dungeon even came into existence in the first place. But it feels as if it's plausible, and that it's not, the dungeon itself is not really like a video game. Like, it feels like this is just a kind of, you know, fantasy kind of version of life that they have to adapt to and survive. And they're just there's new rules. It's almost like, you know, a hard magic system that is just being forced upon them. And it doesn't feel like
they've got to figure it out.
Game. It doesn't feel like a game, and because it's death if you lose, it's like that brings, I think, the normal stakes that maybe other lit RPGs that I've tried actually don't have, where they are literally taking place in like a video game.
Deal with that.
Yes.
The gaming portion of Dungeon Crawler, Carl, obviously is a much bigger part in the first book, because, you know, that's our introduction to it, and that is the kernel, that is the point of the story, is Carl's in the dungeon. And I love that it is our anchor in what becomes this far greater story. that just keeps coming back to Carl, that there's all of this enormous stakes happening in the big wide galaxy. But it always comes back to none of this matters, because Carl might die in the next 5 minutes because something absolutely insane is happening in the dungeon. And unless he can survive that, none of the rest of this matters. And I just love that we get both experiences, that as the story goes, we're getting this really intensely complex story happening outside the dungeon, along with this very simple premise at the heart of it, which is literally survive, don't die.
And he has to be a quick thinker. He has to be athletic and work together in creative ways based on the magic that they have at their disposal, the physical skills, and the limited information. He has to be resourceful and just having like the way that
limited information is a really clever storytelling device, because we immediately know, because they keep telling him, we can't tell you that. Well, clearly there's more to know. So from really early on, when it is still very focused on just Carl and Donut in the dungeon, we know there's more. And those little glimpses, as you said, with the interviews, and when they do, briefly step out of the dungeon for publicist sort of things, and we get that tiny glimpse into the rest of the universe, you're like, oh yeah, there's stuff happening there that's impacting the dungeon, and Carl needs to somehow figure out what some of those big players are doing so he can survive better in the dungeon. And the complexity of that could be very easy to confuse your readers. It could become confusing really quickly, and it doesn't. You always have a really clear idea what Carl needs to be doing to stay alive, outside of the immediacy of actual battle, when nobody can control anything because the AI can put together the most insane things. I love that it tells you that this is a big story right from the beginning. And it's up to you whether you pick up on those things, because it will obviously unfurl as the story goes. But I was ready for it. I was waiting for it. I was like, no, I want to know what these things are. I want to be thus the notes that I was taking. That's going to go somewhere. And the strangest thing has been what has gone somewhere. Things that I just didn't even consider were going to be important plot things. And as the story's gone on, I'm like, hang on, wait a minute, that's connected. Yeah, and my next reread, I've gone, oh my God, that is connected. Very clever writing. Very, very clever writing. He knows where he's going with this, and that is obvious.
Yeah, and it's like you're saying, it is so complex and deep, and you can drill down and find little details that matter early on that come back around to be important, and that's what a lot of fans of long epic fantasy series live for. So it's, I think people like me, when I first tried this, I was a little skeptical. I hadn't done lit RPG before, and I got the sense like it was more of a humorous series, so I came in a little skeptical, and then it became just absolutely one of my favorite series because of both the depth and the things I love in long epic fantasy series.
Yes.
But also the fun and engaging just plots and characters. I just love spending time with them. It's like my comfort reads now. I just love spending time with Carl and Donut and their found family, and just, man, having fun, but also having emotional cathartic moments along the way.
It's very deep. Those first couple of books, you're just learning everybody, and you're like, yeah, these people are great, and oh, okay, that person's gone from the story now. That's really sad. But you actually start caring. This dungeon is a game where it's trying to kill off the rest of humanity. So we're going to lose people. That's part of the building of the story. That's literally how it has to go. But you start caring when we lose people. And I was struck by how emotionally invested I became. the first time we lost someone where I cried, I was like, whoa, that hit me way harder than I thought it was going to. And that was when it took this from being, yep, this is really good, I'm enjoying it, I'm rereading, it's great. But that point was when I was like, this takes it from a reread for enjoyment to a reread for love. I love this series. I love that there are characters I can become so invested in that you can get me with that punch.
Yeah.
Because it takes some skill. So
absolutely.
It's
absolutely
impressive.
I'm gonna cherish this one right alongside of Realm of the Elderlings and
so he's right up there with that for me. He's in my top 5, definitely. Because I was thinking about it last night, going, is it the top 5? And I sort of was trying to work it out, and I'm like, well, obviously Robin Hobb, and obviously Discworld, and then there's A Song of Ice and Fire, and I'm thinking, well, then it's sort of like, is the next one Dresden maybe, or is it Dungeon Crawler Carl? Either way, it's top 5.
Yeah, I'm right with you.
So it takes a bit of doing to get up there with these stories. You know, where you are properly excited for the next book.
Yes.
I mean, I had the tiniest of waits for this inevitable ruin. And there was no way I was waiting for the audio. There was just no way. I had to know what was going to happen next. So I had that ebook the moment it came out, which was about 2 a.m. my time. But I was like, no, I'm up. I'm reading.
It was so good too. Before we get spoilers, because Fraternal Cloud's just 300 pages into DCC, and so totally surprised by how much I'm loving the book. Yeah, you're in for a wild ride. So
you really are.
This is probably a good time to bow out, because I want to move into spoilers for the series going forward here in this chat. But come back to it when you've gone through all 7.
We will be here for you
to see a spoiler gush. But this is great news. If you're when I see people loving book 1, it just makes me so happy, because I know how awesome it gets in the later books. I do think it took him a few books to kind of find the real secret sauce with it, the magic recipe where the books are kind of just like firing up all cylinders. And so if you're loving the beginning, I think it's just it bodes well. It bodes well for the rest.
I mean, Brian, who has joined us in the chat, who pretty much brought Dungeon Crawler Carl with him into our corner of BookTube. Thank you so much, Brian. You must love, like, he must be so excited.
Yes.
And how many of us have just fallen in love with this series. I mean, I know how much I love it when other people discover my favorite series and they start talking about it on their channels. I'm like, yeah, someone else loves it. You must be beside yourself, because everybody is loving this series. It is just the most amazing thing.
It's so easy to fall in love with too, because it does start really quickly, and it doesn't,
like literally
it starts in our world. And so,
but you get maybe half an hour in our world.
We're gonna go into spoilers now. So if you have not read book 1 or any of the book or any later books, I would leave, because we don't want to spoil you on anything that happens. The unpredictability of this and finding out what's around the next corner is one of the great joys of the series. So we're gonna get into spoilers. But man, does it, like, when I go back and reread book 1, it's almost shocking how quickly we get into the dungeon. It's like there's this quick little scene at his apartment, and he's outside. All of a sudden, the buildings fall. Like, that is so dramatic.
First scene was like, it was Tuesday at 2 whatever it was a.m. You're like, okay. And then he tells you what he was doing at that time as it all turned to custard.
Yeah.
Okay. And now you know why he's in a dungeon in a jacket and his undies.
It happens so quickly too. Like, he sees his neighbor get like beheaded in front of him.
Yeah.
He's kind of just like traumatized. He's freezing. He runs into the dungeon. Then it's so immersive freezing. Because it's so immersive, this early part, because you could imagine yourself if the same thing happened to you, like how just discombobulated you would be and feel, and like, this is crazy. It's like you went from going from normal life to like, it's a fantasy sci-fi world, and your life is threatened by these, like, this goblin murder dozer coming at you. And
yeah,
it
like
was
within seconds. You're like, what the
the-
hell?
I love that he didn't have Carl like act like it was normal or that he just got acclimated like in a few seconds. Like I love that it felt
He was
really realistic
scary and
for how
panicked
scary, yeah,
and
and just like how
confused and oh,
like
what do I
what the
do?
hell is going on? Yeah, exactly. And I really like the beginning of the whole series where he has Carl just not understanding anything that's going on, stumbling his way into Mordecai's guild, and then like we get oriented through the kind of guild stuff, and I love that like we get some info and orientation to what's going on, and Carl's still overwhelmed, but then we start to see the side of Carl come out, this survivor, this gritty, resourceful, like he doesn't still has no clue what's going on,
But he's angry about it.
He's angry and
I don't like this.
He starts to level up. He
Yeah.
you know, he's getting the feel for his like menus and stats and what they mean. Like he's like thinking strategically. Like I love just like, you know, and we see through the stats of like when he's in the safe room and he sees like how many people are in the dungeon. Like we see in this first book, like millions of people are dying over the course of the first book, and it's like, so we get a sense that like, you know, a majority of the people are not as resourceful and flexible and able to adapt as Carl.
And didn't have that moment of luck of going,
oh,
I can get out of this right now. I just have to do this thing. And not everybody had that moment of clarity. But that introduces us to Carl, and that in those panic moments when most people do that freeze, I don't know what I'm doing, Carl is able to keep thinking, and he might be in a rush and he might not think things through, but he has thought and he's able to see those moments. And that's one of the things that keeps him alive. He is great in that moment of panic when most people are falling to pieces. He's the guy that holds it together, and I'll break down later. His anger and his outrage at what's happened is what really drew me to Carl.
Yeah.
He was just like, no, you don't get to do this.
Yeah.
And that grows as he learns what the situation is.
Yeah.
And his absolute refusal to become a killer to survive.
You will not break me.
Wonderful.
That
that conscious decision of you will not break me. I was like, I love you.
His repetition of some of these lines throughout the whole series is one of these amazing writing elements that helps the whole series cohere. Yeah.
You know, you hear it in the first chapter when he's talking about the cat and the girlfriend, and he's like, I'm not an asshole. He's chosen to not be an asshole. He's in a situation where he could be an asshole. He's been being treated really badly. And he could have been very nasty to his ex-girlfriend. He could have done some really unpleasant things. And he thinks about it and he goes, but I'm not that person. He decides, I'm not going to be that person. And because he makes that a conscious stance, I just fell in love with him. I really did. It would be, he's a big bloke.
Yeah.
You know, he's a big, strong bloke. And he just refuses to cash in on that.
Yes, exactly. And Dinniman is genius in the first book of, it's pretty sparse. It's just Carl and Donut for most of book one. And so we really are getting situated with our POV character and Donut, who's with him the entire time. But he gives us this foil to Carl of Maggie and Frank, who go the other way.
That's right.
And yes, it was tragic when we learned that like their game guide kind of like manipulated them. But
he pointed them in the wrong direction.
It still provides this foil of like they decided that they were going to do this the immoral way of trying to be selfish and through hurting others. And Carl was
succeeding. They were doing really well as a result.
And we saw how scary that could be. And Dinniman sets up this opposition and brilliantly eventually gets the ring into Carl's hands. And you're realizing that, you know, he's tempted. I think there's maybe a clear nod to the Lord of the Rings here with
so much so.
But like where the ring is like tempting him to tap into this power,
and it makes that choice very present in his head all the time, that every death is a moral choice for him, because he has to make the decision, do I use this ring? And because he has to think about it consciously, this isn't just a reaction in the heat of battle. He has to give himself time to mark somebody with this ring to gain that stat point. It becomes I have to actively choose to kill somebody if I use this ring. But the benefit from using it is really big.
And when he starts to use it it's like scary for us. It's scary for us because like, oh my God, like that's first of all dangerous for you if it doesn't work out. And like we get a sense that the more you use it, the more like the temptation kind of
very like, sense so that Lord of the Rings kind of thing.
So
like it wants you to.
It's scary for us to see Carl be tempted by this and to use it. And like I just want him to get rid of the ring the whole time. And when he finally does at the end of Inevitable Ruin, right?
Yeah.
So that is just such a relief.
Picked up a skill along the way that allows her to do that.
It's such a relief that he doesn't have that temptation hanging over him. But I think maybe that's it's more the whole ring is symbolic for Denim, and now that I'm even thinking about it, I didn't even realize maybe just the how symbolic it might have been kind of explicitly of this Carl choosing to be moral and righteous. Yeah.
I love that Denim is making that so clear, that Carl is making conscious decisions all the way through, and that when he has to choose, he chooses not to kill. When he has to choose, he chooses to protect. And it's, for me, as a woman, to read fantasy, that is not how most strong males are presented. Most strong, physically dominant males are not presented that way. We're given the fighters and we're given the heroes who don't think things through and just kind of bully their way through with brute force. Mm-hmm. And Carl is this wonderful example of masculinity with strength, where he uses that to protect people, and he uses that to provide a space where they can be safe and they can trust him to use his strength on their behalf. And there is something really refreshing about that. He respects the women that he works with, and in his team and within the collective group that they end up forming with everybody. He knows that they have skills he doesn't, and he relies on them for that. He doesn't take them for granted, but he's aware that they have these skills and he allows them those skills. He doesn't try and tell them that I know better. He's like, oh, she would be amazing at this. Can you do that? And they're like, yeah, I can do that. He's like, excellent. I'll leave that with you then. And I can focus on this bit that I can do. And there's this wonderful sense of trust and this found family. It's just wonderful to read, where all of these insanely horrible things happening around them. And I say that sentence laughing because some of it is truly ridiculous, even as it's deathly dangerous. It's there. I just don't have higher praise. It is a remarkably well-written situation and characters. I'm so in love with these characters.
The character of Donut might be the side character who we don't get a POV from, that is I am most attached to in like all of fantasy. It's like, and we spend a lot of time with Donut because Donut's always there with Carl. She is such like a child at the beginning, but not really a child. It's more like an adult with a childlike naivete or experience of the world.
There's a lack of morality that children have, where they know right and wrong, but they don't understand right and wrong. And Donut has that. And she will do things that you're like, what are you doing? No, that's okay.
And to see like Donut will say biting, sarcastic things, and she'll be very blunt and honest, and that's where a lot of the humor comes from. But she also has this really sensitive, deep emotional side, like where she'll just want to curl up with Carl in a safe room. And like those are such touching moments. Cat,
when they come to you and they just want to roll into you and start purring, you're like, oh honey, they want a cuddle, they want reassurance, and you're still getting that. In books,
the emotional arc that we go on with Donut in the first few books, where Donut's still like really attached to what's her previous owner,
B.
Carl's girlfriend, B. Donut is kind of like has to put aside her loyalty towards B and kind of recognize that B was not as loyal to her and is going to get rid of her, and
that's really heartbreaking when we realize that she knew.
like when Donut has the heart-to-heart with Carl where he's like, you're my person now, like it is such an amazing emotional arc we go on with the two of them, where Carl also initially kind of still views Donut as his pet.
His cat.
And it's not until he says some things that he has to reevaluate that, where he makes some offhand comments about like, we don't risk our lives for our pets.
Yeah.
And then he realized like
we don't die for our pets.
Yeah. And then Donut
sees that
Donut got touched by that. Yeah. And then
and
Carl realizes like
I don't think of her as that anymore.
Yeah. That we are bonded in a very special way. It doesn't even fit into a normal category of relationship that we would normally have. Like it's not a person and their pet. It's not friends. It's not
lovers,
brothers. It's not siblings. It's something very unique.
But in a way that everybody who's ever owned a pet understands. Yeah. And that we say we don't die for our pets. All of us would die for our pets. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
You know, if we had to run out in front of a truck to save our animal, we're saving our animal. If it happens to injure us, whatever.
Yep.
But there is this sense, particularly as when she gains sentience, which she does do so very early, and you see how frightened she is, that being able to talk to Donut, being able to see her as an individual person rather than as a pet, takes that relationship into something completely different. And the trust between the two of them is beautiful to see.
Yeah. And Donut's like honesty and openness to befriending other people. Like she just wants
she loves
be friends
everybody.
with everyone. And her being so open, like she makes friends
mobs
at all the NPCs in the Desperado, like in the strip clubs and everything. Like everyone becomes so loyal. Everyone becomes so loyal to Donut because she is so open-hearted towards them.
Yeah.
And they latch on to that and just
she's the first person to bring any of the NPC characters into her chat as individuals, instead of just going, they're not one of us, they're part of the game. She sees them as individuals, and that helps them a great deal as the story goes, and we start learning that they've been reused this many times, and some of them are individuals that had lives somewhere, somehow. We're still getting the story on that, but Donut seeing them as individuals was very much the breaking point into that world. And I just love her, and she says things too that show remarkable insight. She says very early in book 2, when we meet Katya, and they've been told by Zev, her relationship with Zev I want to talk about in a second, but Zev says Katya's boring. We need to do something about that. People don't want you in the party with her. And Carl's like, we'll deal with that later. And Donut says, you can't avoid conversations just because they're difficult. And I was like, oh my God, it's actually really profound. And she just openly says to Katya, people don't like you. You need a catchphrase. We're going to dye your hair purple and have a... She's just totally out there with it. But she does it because she's like, if we put this off, it's a problem. But if we do something about it now, everybody will love Katya and we win. I just love her so much.
And with Zev, like we see from Carl's point of view that like Zev and Donut are getting along. They bond over their love of TV shows, and like and Donut wants to go into partnership with Zev, where they both write TV shows after the dungeon. And when Zev is taken away as by her home planet,
it's really upset.
She's really scared.
It's so disheartening.
It is heartening, and even the little touches that Dinnaman does, where even in later books, like when we encounter Zev, he'll say like Donut goes over and gives Zev a headbutt. Like the little touches like that are
she genuinely likes Zev. And I remember very early on thinking, that's really clever, because Zev is this visible portion of this awful system. She's the bad guy. Yeah. You know, she's the enemy. And that is how Carl initially treats her. But Donut, from the word go, sees Zev as an individual who she connects to on an individual level. Zev isn't this big thing that we're just fighting against. Zev is a small portion of that's individual, has her own thoughts and feelings. And Zev opens up to that like a flower to the sun. She's like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
I'm
And
actually really struggling with this job. And,
yeah.
and you see that. And I love it. I just love it so much that
And
she
Dinniman's
can
complexity
be
in the
so
world building too
attached.
of, oh yeah, absolutely, with the depth of Donut's attachments and relationships,
Yeah.
and the sense we get of that without even much page time spent on it.
Yep.
But I love Dinniman's world building with Zev and the Kuatine, because we
She's
see that
not in the
it's not
party,
just
and
this
we see
it's
that
not just this
division.
cliched like everyone from this planet is the same, and
Yeah.
like we see that there's political divisions in every faction, and
Yeah. And we
it's what
see
you're
how
talking
bad
about.
they can
Yeah,
get. We learn very early that Zev's family has been killed
yeah,
because she won't toe the line. And that's like, you're like, oh fuck, that's really serious. And Donut wants to be able to reassure Zev, but can't say anything because she's not supposed to know that happened. And the way they're able to form these friendships and these bonds and still avoid proving that they know things that they shouldn't know because they're getting secrets from when they leave
yeah, yeah.
dungeon to go on talk shows, and they're being told things secretly. The way they're able to navigate that is just, again, it's such clever writing.
Yeah.
Because we later find out that Donut's been helping Zev with this uprising on Zev's home planet, and she's been smuggling entire people in her mouth. So all of a sudden you get sort of 5-6 books in, and you see her rubbing her face against Zev, and you're like, and I can totally see how she got those things to Zev.
Yeah.
Because she's puts her face near people, and it's such cleverness.
There's little things like that where
impressed.
If you blink you'll miss them. I think I missed that one. I missed that little detail about,
I shouldn't have smuggled those infiltrators to you with the infiltrator worms. And then later she just mentions offhand, you can fit like 5 of them in your mouth.
Oh wow.
Oh my
I
God,
missed that. I missed that. That's wonderful. I love and there's mysteries that he seeds early on too, that like you wonder,
and the eulogist and
like,
and
or Lucia Marr, like he shows you early on that something's up with Lucia Marr,
because she shouldn't be there.
It takes many books to get to the more of the bottom of what that's about. And so like I love that there's these mysteries along the way that we know like they're important, and we're there's always going to be more reveals around the next corner. And man, he's wonderful with seeding these and paying them off too, where you feel like you are learning more steadily, but there's still mysteries, and there's new ones.
And man, Lucia Marr's a perfect example. Because as you say, something's up with this kid because she is a child. And we're told very early there's no children in the dungeon. That the children don't come down, they get put in a holding facility. Mm-hmm. Pregnant women don't come down, they get put in a holding facility. We learn from Katia that women can't get pregnant in the dungeon. So why is there a 13-year-old girl with her 2 dogs in the dungeon? So it's already a big mystery. Like it's an obvious mystery. Yeah. There's something weird happening there. And then we start going, these dogs are weird. What's happening with, she's talking to herself in different personalities. And you're like, okay, is she just crazy? And there are just tiny little hints all the way through. And I picked one up on my second read, I think, of Inevitable Ruin, where we get some of the residuals, where we've got Agatha and we get Paulie, who was the guy in the homeless shelter. They have factions between themselves, and we get a conversation with Agatha and one of the people in her faction just before the dungeon begins, and that person is Alexandro, who becomes Lucia's game guide. Who becomes part of Lucia's backstory. So like, oh, okay, so this game guide is one of these residuals who is working against humanity. Oh my God. And then you get that she's somehow got the essences, the minds, the spirits, the whatever it is that makes people. She's got like 120,000 kids in her head. And if she dies, they die. So we're all like, oh my God,
Yeah.
this complete mental case child
Yeah.
who is properly mad is the key to saving humanity. Because if those kids die, that's kind of us over.
Yeah, yeah. I love that
So
this
now we
is
have to
seeded
keep
from the
her
very
alive.
beginning. Yeah. This is seeded from the very beginning. Like Agatha, also a mystery from the very beginning. And I
Yeah.
love that we get like her POV from before, right before the dungeons
Yeah, we
opened,
do get that little
where
snippet of how do I
and we
get
get a sense
myself in
that
the dungeon?
she's starting to get changed by being a human and by forming
Yeah.
relationships, and like I think that's going to come into play. Polly
Yeah.
also talked about starting to
Oh,
like
he's really
take
hurt.
on
Yeah.
the
As a
kind
residual,
of
my job is to give you
emotions
this, tell you
and
that.
perspectives of a
But I've
human.
lived
Yeah.
as Paulie for a while now, and as Paulie, please don't do that, because
Yeah.
humanity's actually kind of cool. So there's, and then the layer beyond that, you're like, okay, so this has something to do with the apothecary, which is something to do with this great big thing happening out there in the galaxy.
Has
I don't
something
even
to
know
do
what
with
the
like,
pointy is yet.
yeah, it has
And
something to
the
do with also
humanists
the
and
AI, like what's
yeah,
like the original AI that's the heart of the center system, and these like
yeah.
newer AIs, and like so this is all gonna
And
eventually
all
tie
of it
together.
somehow
Yeah,
ties
yeah,
to this primal race that Carl
yeah,
chose,
yeah, yeah,
which supposedly has some kind of group mind, which I think is why he ended up in Katya's dream while they were doing the whole try and
Mm.
get her off drugs and get Shia Maria, because that's another whole bit with Shia Maria in him. And you're like, oh, okay. Because he does have a moment where he connects kind of with everybody and he learns a little bit about everybody that he didn't already know. That's fascinating.
Yes, yes, so fascinating. We have Usman dropping by. Is this your first read of
Oh,
book 7?
yeah.
If you want to stick around, we'll try to be avoid too many book 7 spoilers for a little while. I want to go through kind of some of the earlier books with Derri, but yeah,
these big series spanning things that we've like, oh, okay, we've got a path for it now.
Can we
the finish line might not be in sight, but it's like,
oh yeah,
I have an idea where we're going.
yeah. But even just book 1, when you have no sense of really the larger plot, the tension in book 1, I love the design of this, where we start really just with Donut and Carl first.
Yeah,
and then we finally meet another crawler in the safe room.
We meet Frank,
and like is this going to be a new friend? Like something seems a little off though about Frank.
Yeah,
and
Carl's uneasy.
The tension that ratchets up like in that first interaction, and then he catches Frank in the lie, and there's this showdown, and like we go from just like 0 to 100 in terms of tension.
Yeah,
and we escape, and then luckily they escape them, and like Carl lays the trap,
and Carl booby traps the goblin on the way, give them time.
Yeah,
we only know purpose of it.
Only on reread, like how tragic that's gonna be for like
that's
that.
Right.
But like we then escape them, and we then start making our way through more of this dungeon, which is basically empty, and we're with Carl and Donut. And I think book 1 really comes to life for me when he meets the Meadowlark crew.
Yeah,
and like
because he has to go. Would I have made that decision? Because these people they're really old.
Yeah, and they're taking care of them, and he meets Imani, has a lot of player killer skills. Like he's like skeptical, but he wants to make friends, and he's also like worried once he finds out that like they're all really great people that are trying to save all of these elderly people, and like he goes and tries to sabotage some of their signage so that
the
like,
other
bad
people like Frank and Maggie don't find
Yeah.
them. And so that protectiveness is obvious really early, but also that quick thinking when there's a situation. He doesn't just trust this other human that he's met. He's like, oh yeah, hi, it's kind of weird that we didn't see you here when we arrived. Okay. But that little bit of suspicion was enough to make him really pay attention. And because he was paying attention, he was able to catch all of the clues that told him something's not right here. Donut and I need to get out now, because he's gonna try and kill us. and that quick thinking, that ability to assess a situation, take in what's happening, and make that decision, that really quick call that we have to act this way right now or we're dead. And when he meets Meadowlark, you see a very similar thing. He looks at the situation, he assesses what's happening. And even though Yolanda has all of those player skulls, he's able to look at that situation and he says to Donut, don't worry about that. That's not what that is. Because he can, just from his own experience in the dungeon, he's like, there'll be a reason she's had to do that, because she's not happy about this and she's not hurting anybody here who are vulnerable and who would be easy targets. So very quickly we establish that he thinks fast and he thinks clearly in those moments of assessment, which a lot of people don't. And we see that, and the numbers fall so fast in that first level. You know, we meet these younger people who are looking after these elderly folk who have survived, and they're wonderful people.
My God, Brandon is so sympathetic from like the very beginning. Like, man, Dinniman makes us really fall in love with Brandon, which is so painful that, you know, we lose him soon after.
And he's the first time you start thinking, oh shit, this might get quite hard.
My God, yeah, I that's
it was
so
the first
brutal.
Time I teared up. I was like,
no. when we hear Brandon and Jeff Hayes like also delivering Brandon's message from like Brandon's voice, like it's so
at
pure
that point,
of heart.
Brandon knows it's the end for him.
Yeah, it's so pure of heart, and just like how he says,
Tell
like
my
an
brother
argument
I
with
love
Chris,
him.
like that is so heartwarming. We did not spend much time with Brandon, but the little that we did makes that,
you know, he's a
really emotional. Yeah.
And
seeing also
that
like
wanted
Amani
to be friends with him.
And like between Chris, like Amani, like other people that knew Brandon, like it was so hard for them. Like the way that Dinniman builds these interpersonal webs is so touching.
Yeah.
But even just in the beginning, like we meet Amani, like,
and you see their
Yolanda,
shyness, like, and their pressure that's on them, and how much it's really weighing on them, that
and Yolanda too, like
these people
and just doing anything she can to take care of the Meadowlark residents. The book one is building to this crazy moment of like, you feel like everyone, they're gonna get out, they figured out a way to get all the Meadowlark people to the stairwell, and it is building to this moment where Dinniman does this like, you know, crazy crass thing where he has this, you know, guy pee on the wall, and but that has real consequences. And like it goes almost into the slow motion moment where this demon comes and kills Yolanda. Like that is so intense.
Nothing anybody can do.
So intense. And the way then that, you know, Carl has to outsmart the demon and
the
get
dungeon,
to the like it's great. Like the tension of this whole part, and it's so sad. Like we didn't spend much time with Yolanda, but it still hit so hard.
But he gave you so much. He gave us the grief that she was carrying, that she'd had to help so many people end their lives to save the remainder of them, that she carried that weight and that it meant so much to her, and of the older folk that remained. You know, I said earlier, I love Ellie. I just love Ellie so much because she says they're good kids, these kids that are looking after us. She's lost quite a few of her marbles when we meet her early on, because she's 99. She's lived a life, and
Carl risks his life
for these young
Carl risks his life to save her, which has huge payoffs. Like she doesn't forget.
He thinks about
that Carl saved her life.
Why am I saving this woman? She shouldn't be here. This is not a place for the elderly. This is dangerous for them. Why are we saving them?
And they don't even know.
Think about that.
Yeah, and they don't even know that everyone's gonna get a chance to kind of get a new body or race later on. So like they don't know that, and like
none
it was
of them
so
really
touching.
grasp it. Only these young people are like, if we can just get them to the third floor.
Like little things too hit so hard. Like the fact that there was a group of the Meadowlark residents who decided to just stay in the safe room and kind of just
nah,
sing.
It's all right.
Like that was so touching. That, like they're gonna sing their way out. And then it was also touching though that people 99 years old like Ellie still have this grit and want to survive even in this harsh.
I want to live.
Love that.
I don't know what's going on, but I'm gonna live.
Yeah, I love that there were both of those kind of factions in the Meadowlark group. That was very touching. And man, another big moment in book one is Carl getting whisked away to the Maestro's show. And
Oh my
this
God,
is like one of my favorite moments from book one. Like
But
he
you see his
immediately
rage in that one.
keys in that he is an asshole, and he
Oh,
tries
and
to
he
sabotage.
assessed it.
Yeah,
I'm going to assess the situation, and you see him go. I'm looking at the crowd, and he sees that demographic, and immediately he's like, "Oh shit."
yeah, and then there's this crazy segment where it's like, you know, Li Jun and
yeah,
Zhang, and I think it was
Lena and
just
Zhang,
and they were brought on. I think just Zhang and Li Jun, or
yeah,
maybe
just
just one of them
Zhang,
was brought on.
yeah,
But
because Lena was
and
left in the dungeon, who we saved her.
Carl figures out how to screw the Maestro's show over and also save Li Jun and them.
Yep.
And like, I love
tells
late. Like,
them
we don't see
he's
them
gonna
again
send you
maybe
back.
until like
Do this.
floor 4. Carl doesn't see them again. But the fact that he saved them has ripple effects. Like,
Yeah.
they then have a loyalty towards Carl. They're basically become part of his larger party going forward. And like, man, I love little touches like that. But that was a really intense moment from book,
because he decides
book one.
again, no, you don't get to treat our lives like a game, even though that's literally what all of them are living through. The fact that the Maestro has kind of picked on this little group and gone, ha ha, we're going to make this a joke. Carl is so offended by that.
Yeah.
That you can do that to anybody. He's like, no. And in the moment, even in the moment, he's prepared to go, send me. If you're going to play around with transporting people, send me.
Yeah, it's great. And then
and
the fact that Carl doesn't fully realize the political stakes at play outside of the dungeon. Like, it's like he almost dies because
he's insulted a prince.
He insulted this prince, this huge asshole, and he almost dies for it because, you know, he got their trailer got changed in the next show that they come on.
Next time they went anywhere.
He almost died, but it was, you know, the different trailer got shot up, and so like,
and even
he then starts to learn. He then starts to learn that he has to be more savvy and careful, and start to learn about the politics.
He has to know who he can and can't offend, and he fights himself on it because you can hear him when he's in those interviews going, "I shouldn't say this. Keep your mouth shut. Don't say it. Don't say it." As he says it. And he's like, but actually.
But some of the humor that results from this, like Donuts joking at like the Meister's expense, or the Snicks, and like the people in Odette's show saying like glurp glurp as a joke to make fun of the Meister's, like those are some incredibly clever, funny jokes. Yeah.
Because it relies on the scene before. It builds on itself. The humor builds on itself. It creates its own in-jokes. It creates this sense of mockery where you've got this one set of people on the outside who understand that Maestro is an asshole. And the fact that he's a prince means that they can't really have a go. But Carl did. And we can highlight the fact that Carl did and go, we like that. We're not doing it. It's not us. We're not doing it. But look. And I just, because a lot, we see it in our world, particularly in the US with talk shows, where you've got humorous talk show people will poke fun at current political events because they can.
Yeah.
We're just making a joke, but they're pointed. And we're seeing that with the dungeon where we get Odette. She's making these jokes and she's very pointedly pointing out this is happening. And we need to be paying attention. And we get quite a lot of Odette's backstory. Even just in that first meeting, we find she'd been in the dungeon. She'd had all these awful things happen to her. She has to use crab legs because her legs got chopped off. We get how serious this was for Odette. And we get that before we get the story of when she was in the dungeon with Mordecai as a game guide. So we're getting all of this backstory for people who are outside the current danger, but we hear about the dangers they had to face. And that brings in more elements and more moments of conflict that we still have to deal with in the current game.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so good. Like the way that we start, maybe book 5 or 6, I can't remember, but like back in the dungeon with Mordecai, like where, you know, Odette's betrayal of Mordecai essentially for her own game. Like that is a payoff of something that we're hinted at since book one, it pays off.
Why does Mordecai
later,
hate her so much? And we finally
and
get
to
that
find that it's like it's not just hate. It's like this very complex relationship. Yeah.
And it's like, she got me to that stage where I could live, but my brother died. Yeah. And that was an active choice on her part. And we had that bribery element that came into it.
Yeah.
And now we've got outside the dungeon repercussions.
And it's still gonna pay off because we have Audette and Guanxing Jinx like still in the dungeon together as gods. So like this is gonna get crazy with them. Usman said, "Love the found family in a system that promotes backstabbing and betrayal." Yeah.
And we also get a sense so much.
We also get a sense that this particular group of that with Carl and Donut at the heart, who then befriend Meadowlark and slowly befriend more and more people.
And just they help Li Jun and John. Group of people.
That this is a special kind of found family that previous seasons of Dungeon Crawler World haven't experienced. Like
because people they're able into that role of
through their
everybody to live
through their determination to help. Yeah, like this is becoming an outlier situation where they're getting more people to the 9th floor than ever got there before. They're getting more people through the 9th floor than ever got out. Like they're and
this is the most people that ever needed a lawyer on the 10th.
Yeah, I love how
we even get Quasar saying, the Lawyers Guild love you because
the
we got so much work out of this.
And the showrunners like Cascadia is saying, was at the beginning of floor 4 or 5, I think after the Tangle, where we they said like because you're all working together, we're gonna have like stricter rules on like parties and and
we're going to limit how many of you can work together because we love how plucky you humans are.
Yeah.
But we actually want to focus on individuals. And so they're actively trying to drive wedges between the crawlers and put them in situations where they must choose between, backstabbing a friend or dying. And as many opportunities as possible, the human crawlers are finding ways around this so they don't have to kill each other. And you can see Cascadia getting more and more frustrated with this. You can see the AI going, how do I kill these humans? And the sense of pressure that you sense through Cascadia particularly, where clearly the words come from on high. Why isn't this dungeon doing what it's supposed to do? It's this wonderful sense of the 1%, the powers that be not having to do the dirty work, and suddenly the people doing the dirty work can't. And where does the power lie now? Well, now it's with the crawlers.
Yeah, and with the AI kind of like with Carl's like turning off the failsafe, which we only learned that he's able to, and so with that, like the power shifted to the crawlers and this kind of AI, and
yet it's still weird because the AI isn't necessarily on their side.
But until the end of book 6, until the end of Bedlam Bride, where they got approval to turn the protections off in Faction Wars, all of the 1%, like the power players in the galaxy, still feel like they're in control.
They're fine.
And then their lives are actually at stake during Faction Wars in a situation that's never arisen before.
Playing before that, because Carl got that the failsafe turned off at Christmas. Mm-hmm. So there was time during that floor for the AI to work before anyone realized that.
Yeah.
And so the AI put in place a quarantine. Nobody can leave. Everybody's here now. All of the powers of the galaxy are in Earth's galaxy, our solar system, and nobody can leave now. And then when Carl figures out, I can give this power to the AI if I just make this one request. As a special, I can't remember now the ruling that they can ask for as a warlord, because for the first time ever, he's bought a spot in Dungeon World. Is all of these wonderful kind of forces have lined up to allow Carl all of these opportunities, and he's been quick enough to pick up on them and go, oh, okay, that information means this. plus that information I got from them means there's an open spot. And I've just figured out that because I'm part of the dungeon, I'm legally allowed to be part of the, okay. And none of it falls into place for the reader until it happens. And you're like, oh, of course, that's what he's been doing.
And it's so satisfying. It's so satisfying for the reader, like that Carl and the AI, like they're able to take back some autonomy and control of their situation
without having a discussion about it. They think about it, and in terms of,
and so it is hidden from the reader really well.
Thinking, you know,
but it's just so satisfying that like Carl's not just completely, you know, at his survival and life. He's not completely at the mercy of the powers that be and the showrunners. Like this is shifted towards him having more autonomy and control, and the AI having more control, which is creating chaos. It just makes for such engaging books where anything can happen. You feel like
absolutely,
and the stakes are as high as can be.
Thought from Carl, because back in book 2, when we first meet the elites and we get his first quest, and he steps outside, once he figures out this is a sub story that's being run by a different company, he's like, because he's learned at this point, I'm a valuable asset for this crawl, and they charge people for me to be on their things. So when he finds out that the daughter of the whatever it is, the Revenge of the Daughter TV show is a separate thing to the dungeon crawl, he's like, okay, put me in touch with the showrunners and I will give them an exclusive for me on the next
it's so clever.
This game. So immediately now he needs a lawyer. So far earlier than anyone else has any access to the legalities of how this game runs, far earlier than anyone else ever has, he starts getting that access to, okay, this is a TV drama for most of the galaxy. If I treat it like a TV system where I'm the highest paid person, I've got some clout.
Yeah.
You know, and he starts to leverage it really early, because he's just able to assess that situation and go, I have value. Maestro, again, the only reason he argues with Maestro is because Maestro tells him it's cost us so much money to get you on the show. So he's like, okay, I can use that.
Yep. And so clever. It's so clever.
That flow-on thing within the story is so cleverly.
It is, and it is part of this larger satire. Done. It's part of this larger satire that Diddaman's doing of capitalism and of, you know, the entertainment industry, and there's this satire that's really smart. You know? This whole aspect of it is so smart. Yes, so clever, so smart. And used to great effect in this particular story, but it adds this thematic depth that is really, really great. And can we go back to book 2 though? One of the things I love about a binge of the series is the flow from book to book, where something really crazy will happen towards the end of one of these books, and we'll get to out of the floor somehow, some way to survive. In the next book, we kind of get this reset where we like learn about what is going on with this new floor. What is this new exciting situation going to be? And then we get like into the safe room, and we reflect on what happened before through like seeing the achievements, and
it's such a clever way to go into the next book.
To like process what happened.
Getting those achievements reminds you how that previous floor ended, because he says to you, I got this achievement. Oh, that was from when that happened. And then the prizes that he gets inform you what's coming.
And they're always so interesting and quirky and exciting. Like, oh, how is he going to use that now? Or how is he going to use that spell or that skill? Or like, and it's a lot of...
That's a worry. It's really astonishing.
I love the flow from book to book, how we have these like quieter reset moments to process what came before and to look ahead. And then, man, book 2, so weird and interesting. Like, it's such a different feel.
It changes in the vibe. Because we go from traditional
we're now into more this like
spaces.
To now like, oh, this is like feeling like a you know, medieval fantasy or like pre-modern kind of fantasy world. And there's a circus, and I must say on my first read, on my first read, this quest with Signet, it was hard for me to fully care about it, and at every read I've cared more about it because I know that a lot of these characters are going to return for book 5 and beyond. And also, like, I'm paying attention to more of the details. Like, I'm not worrying so much about the propulsion of the plot, but
no, that's right.
The details he puts in
to the stuff.
The details he puts in around the circus, like, there's a lot of emotional weight to even the circus and the Signet's relationship.
The first time we learn about the all tree.
The all tree. And then the flashback, the sensory memory of that
of
Carl
the circus
has
and
with
Carl's
his mom.
memories of his father, and you're like, oh, okay, he's got this really heartbreaking backstory,
and he remembers this
an abusive relationship, and his mother was really broken by this, and she tried really hard to get.
And there was this beautiful memory that he has of being at the circus with his mom, and like the smell of it was the same.
Yeah, because that's how, let's face it, that's how memory works for all of us, isn't it? We smell something and we're like, oh, my nana used to smell like that. And he smells this popcorn, this circus smell. And it kind of goes from there because it hurts him to have those thoughts come up. And he's got all of this emotional turmoil kind of all stirred up inside him, and it's upsetting. But he also finds a way to get strength from it, and that he then thinks about the fact that little pokey out of the way circus that he went to with his mum, they gave him trees. They gave him seedlings, which were still standing decades later when he used Google Maps to look at his grandparents' old house, and there were those trees. And that was where he really gained this sense of, if we look after this, we can make it grow. And that's when he's like, no, they're not going to break me. Because he nearly broke in that situation because of that emotional turmoil. And he was kind of up in the air about, do I use this? Do I not? The easiest way for me to win this is to be brutal, is to go in and kill, is to do what they expect the crawler to do. And instead of going in and collapsing the circus and killing the father and making the ending what the showrunners wanted it to be, instead he's found a way to make Signet and her husband communicate, and fixed it that way. So instead of gaining all these levels, instead of gaining all these skill points, instead of gaining a boss battle loot thing and winning a borough boss fight or a city boss fight, instead he sacrifices those points. He sacrifices that level in order to not kill an entity.
And there was this deep moment too between Grimaldi, I think, and Signet, and even though it was kind of an invented persona and memories for them, like, it was real to them that they had this relationship.
For them, it's real, 100% familial devotion, love for their partner, heartbreak at how long they'd been separated, how many other people had died, and it was meaningful for them in that moment.
And we get there through some crazy, like, the mix of that deep, heartfelt, emotional moment. But to get there, we had some crazy zany stuff, like Carl wins his fight with the scratch-off card. The scratch-off card. I love the fireball or custard. Dinnaman is insane. I love it. Like, he is such a zany mind for him to think of that. He gets the custard, and that ends up healing the parasites. Like, that is genius.
And so the bear on roller skates becomes the old bear from the circus.
That was genius. That was genius.
And you see the pain of it. And that is what clues Carl in. This is how I can do this.
Yeah. I mean, that hits for me. That hit much harder on reread when I was not worrying too much about, like, I think I was more attached to this type of story from book 1. Yeah. And then the storytelling changes. It shifts to this quest style storytelling. It slows down. And in book 2, we also meet some key other members of Carl's party. Like, we meet Katya, and she's so
scared.
She's scared and meek, and knowing where she goes later, it's really touching to see, like, Carl and Donut kind of like take her in at this point, and also we
genuinely think she's behind. We need to help her gain the points, to gain the strength, so that she becomes more powerful. Instead of going, we could put her in a situation where she dies and we get the points and the loot, and because she's got some pretty good loot. So, But having met,
Yeah.
again, going back, having met Frank and Maggie, they had already made that conscious choice to not play that way.
Yeah.
So, of course, they're going to help Katya when Katya comes along.
And Carl knows that it's like, oh no, like this might hurt our ability to progress.
Yeah.
Like it might get in the way, but like he's still doing it, and he's
Yeah,
still
it's going to slow us down,
yeah.
but okay.
And they meet Bautista too, and Bautista, we see his family just got like killed.
That's right,
before,
because we meet his. Well, we don't meet. We encounter Bautista's family first.
Yeah.
You know, we find the bodies. We take what's left of what's on their bodies, and then we meet Bautista later, because at this point they're all still human, and we know something hideous has happened to that group because of the chaos and carnage at the site of the dead bodies. And Carl goes, there must be surviving people in this party because of the volume of carnage and the fact that these bodies have been looted but not desecrated. Like their stuff has been taken, but they haven't hurt what remains of these people. And so Carl's kind of on the lookout for whoever that was. Because he's like, people have survived this. So and there's people here.
Carl and Donut become, and Katya even, they become the center of this party where they take in the strays who have lost their family. Like they take in Bautista, they take in Florin, who, you know, loses Akechi in that heart-rending scene.
Heartbreaking scene.
Yeah. And so like they take in these people who we would forgive them if they had just given up based on their tragedies, but they just keep going. They're resilient. And they join the party.
Because we see that when they go from the Tangle, they go onto the bubble level, and we get shown that Florian hasn't moved. He hasn't even chosen where he's going to go. Yeah. He just stays there until almost at the end of the floor, when he's like, "Oh, come on, keep going." And as soon as he actually chooses a bubble and discovers that Carl and Katya and Ali and Imani have found a way to help everybody, he's like, "Oh, okay, I better get a move on," you know.
And I love too. Dinneman is so clever. He's so good with the details. So like, other characters that have not interacted in person with Carl, they might only see him on that recap show, and he's edited on that recap show to come off as like a psychotic, like violent person.
Cuts off the hands.
And so like, so like people are a little afraid when they first meet Carl, and then they see that he and Donut are not like, you know, how they're portrayed on the show, and like just like little things like that where characters know of other characters like from this recap show, and even from just like the top 10 list, like as a reader, we only know of certain characters because they show up on that top 10 list. Like,
I mean, we
like
meet
Dimitri,
the Popov brothers,
Dimitri and Maxim Popov, like who are they? Or like Bogdan Rowe, who is that?
They're in Wallaby before we meet them. We don't know their story, but we know their story. Yeah. When we do meet them, it's not a surprise. We don't need the backstory in the same way it would be if we hadn't had the top 10 lists.
And this storytelling is so clever. Like we see Lucia Marr being like crazy on the recap show. We also see Hecla being just like a badass
warrior woman.
And so
you know,
we like that's set up for when we finally meet Hecla in person. It's really tense because we know how intense she is.
Yeah.
And this like we could keep jumping from it insane moment to moment here in the early books. Like book 2, like them getting out of that floor with the doomsday scenario, kind of him taking that into his inventory, and like them escaping, and the like explosions going off, and everyone being awarded like a celestial box.
The NPC characters are former crawlers.
Yeah.
We've met this guy who's been used horribly.
Yeah.
At Remix. And that he was famous, that he was this really, because they couldn't understand why their views were so high.
Yeah.
And it wasn't to do with them at all. It was Remix, this huge star of a previous crawl. And to then have him go out the way he did, it is its own tragedy. And then Carl's sort of got the remnants of that story in the doomsday scenario. That soul crystal that's exploded and is just about to go.
Yeah.
And that's where we get the first insight into the finances behind the crawl, because the fallout of that is the celestial box that Quan gets.
So good. Yeah.
the what's the word I'm looking, the framework of this series, the way that
Yeah.
he clearly knows where he's going, because everything leads so cleanly into the next stage.
Yeah.
And that, he wrote this knowing that this is going to lead to that, and that's going to lead to this, and that's going to lead to this.
Yeah.
So streamlined.
Yeah.
So
And you're
well
right
done.
that he really starts building the humanity of the NPCs in book 2 with Signet and Grimaldi and Remix, and that only gets ramped up in book 3 in the Iron Tangle floor and the Dungeon Anarchist cookbook,
when we meet
because we meet Firebrandy and
who I love.
Growler Gary,
Growler Gary,
Growler
Gary, and
yeah.
Because he's already when they meet him, he's like, I wanted to go and help my friends and I couldn't leave the bar, and he's been killed and he remembers being killed.
Yeah.
Then he's woken up in a pool of blood, still alive. And
like
the trauma of that in Gary.
You and then seeing we might be getting someone who has not read DCC in here for a second. We'll hold off on spoilers while you're here, Theo.
Hey, Theo.
But hello, and once you get through all the books, come back.
Yeah, come back.
We did have a non-spoiler gush session at the for the first 20 or 30 minutes of this. So that could give you more enthusiasm for just continuing, because
it's so good. It really is. Because that comes back, what we were just talking about. And that's the moment that is being, manipulated into propaganda on later levels, where they're interspersing those moments with Gary, with Carl laughing maniacally, like, whoa, just.
I can't wait for Theo. I can't wait for you to keep reading. It is a wild roller coaster ride that just gets deeper and deeper the farther you go. So don't stick around too much longer here, because you'll get spoiled on some stuff. We're kind of talking about things that are happening now in books 2 and 3.
And the bigger picture.
But
because it is.
Feel free to go back and check out the beginning.
The optics, that's the word I was trying to find.
Beware of spoilers.
Yeah. The game runners are controlling the optics.
And in book 3, the character stuff he does with just this little throwaway NPC character, Firebrandy, she's like, this demon is giving birth. It's like so ridiculous, but she ends up having this very heartfelt story of like that she's
constantly giving birth.
Comes to her self-awareness and awareness that she's this character in this larger game-like situation, and
it awakens those memories, and that she's never been able to keep her children.
And so Dinnaman's
broke me
on a journey.
Myself.
It was so sad, and just seeing her help them towards the end of that level,
and the way she chose to go out. She's like, I can't do this again. I can't. And it was so not only emotional but meaningful, because it shows you that they are real entities. They may have been born into the dungeon or created for the dungeon, but that they form characters, they form entities that do care, that have lives, that have hearts, that interact with each other, that have dreams, that have goals, that are completely non-existent, because at the end of every floor they just get sucked back into the machine and spat out in a different way for a later crawl, and with different memories, with different lives, dreams, hopes. And the tragedy of that is awful, because when they do start to remember, they remember those feelings. They remember that they had children that they loved, that don't even exist.
Yeah, by the way, Derri, I'm hesitate to spoil you, but I don't know if you're ever going to get your hands on the bonus,
the extra
information. So I could try to figure out how I can get you that, because I don't know if they're ever going to be recorded by Jeff Hayes audio. They might just exist in these, but we get certain it's backstage at the Pineapple Cabaret, and it's like a continuing story, and it's essentially following certain NPCs from each book that kind of like get taken to the backstage at the Pineapple Cabaret, and like after their books are flourished, like they're still continuing on with their awareness from like what happened, like with like Carl and whatnot.
I'm going to need to
so-
win the lottery.
So,
oh my God, they're expensive to get here.
It's interesting to see like which NPCs are.
I do know I have a gift of the first book coming. So.
Oh, nice. But and it's fun to see like some of those NPC characters get built out a little further with their actual POVs. And do you want to know who some of them? Do you want to know who some of the NPCs? So the Goblin Shamanka from book 1 is one of them. I forget a donut named them like Rory and like those two of them. They continue on in the backstage. Yay! And Growler Gary shows up after book 3. Oh man, I forget.
Because I did like Growler Gary.
I forget who got added in after book 2, but I'll try to make sure you can read some of this somehow.
Awesome. I would really appreciate
that.
But
they're great chapters. They're great and they are building to something. There was mention of the backstage when the AI gave the orcish princess
formidable. That was an option for her, wasn't it? To be backstage.
You could go to the surface or you could go to the backstage. And I'm like, oh my God, right. I know what that is now.
Whereas for me, who hasn't had those bonus chapters, it's just a throwaway thing.
Yeah.
I love that.
No, and I think it's going to come into play in like an important way at some future point.
Well, it's clearly relevant to something that we'll start to see.
Yeah. So that's fun. It's fun. I do like that there's this bonus content, but I wish Jeff Hayes almost like added on to the audiobooks so that we could get his performance of it.
It might be. I might go back onto Sound Booth Theatre and see if it's on one of their streams, because there's a surprising amount of Dungeon Crawler stuff on the Sound Booth Theatre YouTube channel.
I know that these hardcovers are a separate rights thing because they're the only thing that Dinneman gave to the trad publisher, which is awesome. Like he's able to keep his paperback rights and audio rights.
Because they're different.
What's in here might be hardcover specific, I'm imagining.
Quite possibly.
Yeah. So it's like
the
bone he threw.
Good for him. Awesome to hear how successful that is being for him. But I mean, even though we're talking spoilers, the third book is called The Anarchist's Cookbook, and we're calling it The Train and Tangle. The cookbook was
so
awesome
good.
Because we got led into it with the twinkle of the soft toy cases that led to the Doomsday scenario in book 2.
Yeah.
So the twinkle of something that the AI wants Carl to pay attention to is in this gift carousel.
Yes.
And that gets lost in the moment of Chaco and Mordecai being taken away to a timeout because he's thrown a chair at Chaco.
Yes.
You're like, what is going on there? And now they don't have Mordecai and panic stations.
Yep.
But there's this prize.
This
cookbook.
Derri, this is the moment the series changed for good.
It stepped up at that point.
The entire series just got elevated once Carl is reading these cookbook entries from former crawlers, like hearing these other voices that aren't Carl's, and getting all these different POVs and
insights into what the dungeon is going to do to you.
And him becoming a part of this brotherhood that's a secret brotherhood over a long period of time. And it pays
hundreds of years.
So spectacularly. It pays off in book 7 moment when he meets Tippett and Rosetta, when they came and like he hugs them and it's like, we're here for you.
And everyone's like, what the fuck? How do you?
And then the same thing. We get the same kind of emotional moment when he meets Milk.
When he meets Milk.
My
goodness,
goodness,
cried because she's very much a motherly figure as well.
Yeah.
So that kind of maternal hug that she gives Carl is really cathartic, and you see it in Carl because he does take a moment to have a cry, and you're like, oh honey, so lovely. It's the fact that the cookbook itself exists is interesting. because it means an AI at some point has generated it for Porthos, who becomes the editor of the second edition. So the first edition was AI generated at some point,
and the AI is involved in
fascinated.
And the AIs are involved in passing this on to deserving
the AIs
people.
Keep it alive, and they spell out the rules. The first thing the crawler sees when they open it, these are the rules. You can't tell anybody. You can't say this out loud. The AI knows this exists, but it isn't breaking any rules. But don't mention it. And the secrecy of it and the way they're able to interact with the knowledge of this cookbook with the crawlers who are outside the dungeon, because we've met Odette. And so even though she's not aware of the anarchist cookbook, she is aware as a crawler that if she points Carl in the right direction, if she gives him the right information, he's able to make smarter choices the next time he's in a dire situation. So when we get that information, plus the information in the cookbook, plus the hints that the AI is doing its damnedest to give them, there's a surprising amount of knowledge that a lot of entities are trying to give the crawlers. There's a surprising amount of help for the crawlers. And it's only when Carl actively thinks, the AI wants this to balance. The AI wants this to be fair. So there has to be a way for me to use this that gives me an advantage. And once he starts thinking that way, it really alters the way he plays.
Yeah. And
but only getting that cookbook in the train floor is how he manages that.
Yeah. Just so good. Oh, I just want to mention, for spoilers, it just occurred to me that most people probably have not finished book 7 yet. So
true.
We'll stick to spoilers through book 6, and then we'll have a section just on book 7, I think. But
we'll be talking about the series again, no doubt.
So I'll try to not mention the stuff that happens in book 7 until we get to book 7. But man, the cookbook is this incredible storytelling device that allows Dinniman to deliver a lot of exposition about the world, the way things work, about other
different
home
species,
planets and races
calls.
and species. And it's in a genius way that never feels like info dumping. I was always engaged by the cookbook entries. They never overstayed their welcome. Some are really short, some are long, some have a lot of entries, some very few. Like the way that he varies it and plays with like wondering what's going on with these different crawlers. And then like I won't say what happens in book 7, but the fact that we get the actual
at the
POVs.
End of book 6, where they're like, okay, they're coming, because that's
but we get the POVs. Like he does a lot of POV interludes in book 7 of the cookbook authors. I love and getting
it's done
the POVs.
really well. Because it's like an epigraph where you get a little scenario with this is happening from this, and it might be current, it might be old, it might be from their time in the dungeon. And then we get, this is the character, this is the edition of the cookbook, and this is their current status.
Oh, so good, so good,
glorious.
But I love that for these earlier, like he keeps it a secret, and he has to keep it a secret from everyone, and so it's this thing that only Carl and we, the reader, are clued in on. And it becomes our little secret with Carl. And
he's like, how do I make this sound like my idea? That's a really good idea. I could use that right now. And you're like, oh, how's he going to do it? And because he has this clarity of thought, you're able to see how he kind of tries to manipulate. Sometimes you're like, oh dear, that's a bit obvious, Carl. Come on. you clearly had a moment of inspiration for that one. But the AI kind of lets it go. Okay.
No other characters like are able to call him out on it because it's not clear to them how he would gain this. So
he is still an idiot. He still does dumb things. It's really only in the high stakes moments that his thinking is clear. Because for the rest of the time he misses so much. And Donut has to point so much out to him.
Absolutely. In book 3, that cookbook, like him getting the cookbook is a huge series defining moment. Another series defining moment is the incredible action scene where he and Hekla's team are teaming up to
Oh my gosh, and Katya's
plow
on the
through
train and they're
to
plowing
plow
through the
through, and
mobs.
they put Katya on the front. We know this is gonna go bad somehow.
We're like, this is
And-
going to go horrifically wrong.
And
How
then
is this going to go wrong?
and then Katya almost dies. It was so
What
tense.
is happening?
And
Why is
Donut,
the vanishing?
it was so key. It was so key that Donut was able to see Hekla fire the arrows into Katya, because that
With
clues
these
Donut in
glasses.
that Hekla's lying and Hekla's evil. And
Donut
then
had to be the
Katya-
one that made that discovery.
Katya-
Otherwise, she wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah. And Katya taking this moment to gather her strength and lash back out against her bullies was such a great moment of her, like, she didn't even mean to kill Hekla, but she meant to kill Eva. Like, but
that's right.
It ended up
that still isn't controllable enough for her yet.
And so that was just this jaw-dropping moment where, like, oh my god, I thought Hekla was one of the main characters of the series.
Yeah, I was anticipating that to be a longer-term thing. He's like,
Dinnerman just took her off the board. Like, you feel like anyone is in danger from an early time in this book, and like a champion has fallen. Like, Katya gains all this stuff. Like, there's this scrum on the train over Hekla's body, and Katya comes away with the crossbow. Like, what's going to happen with Hekla's party? It's just cast. And it's so intense.
It's one of those that leads on to different things, because those members of the party become important as they spread out later. And the what's the word I'm looking for? The diaspora of those characters, and the way we then meet more, the way the game is trying to make them kill each other ultimately. When they figure out that humans form connections, they're like, okay, we need to split them up. So we get groups broken into smaller groups. We get groups from other regions swapped in, so that we get on the following floor with the bubble, we get people that they haven't met before. So it would be easy to kill them. They're strangers. And everyone refuses to. I was like, no. Just no. The Hekla, Eva, and the daughters that have been formed part of Hekla's group, you kind of learn a lot about the way the game manipulates bigger numbers of people. And they formed this big group around Hekla, but they gave Hekla a weapon that meant the more people in her party that met that criteria made her weapon stronger. So she ended up with this massive party, but none of them could level up very fast, because there's only so many points to go round when they killed a boss. So, which is why we end up with Katya with such a low score at the beginning of the previous level, because there isn't enough to go round. So you end up then a couple of floors later with huge groups of numbers that are outclassed. They can't survive these mobs. They're not strong.
And you're right. The game is, we learn that the AI and the whole design is to really favor certain crawlers to build up a really powerful group at the top who can be like viewers' favorites, and viewers follow them. And this happened with Carl and Donut. Like, Donut was, I think, the first cat in the dungeon. That's how they got the pet biscuit. And like, that pet biscuit is like really powerful. Like, not only making her sapient, but like
he could have sold it. And that was the advice Mordecai gave him. It's worth a lot of money.
But it made her super powerful with stats from an early point. And like, people who had good items and high stats from the beginning had this huge advantage just ongoing. And Carl, like, catching the attention of AI with him smushing stuff with his bare feet, like, that helped him get these super powerful items. Like his boxers that he got were super powerful, and like his kits for taking care of his feet, and like, it's like, certain crawlers are definitely favored, and Hekla was one of those.
Mordecai tells them the dungeon will find a look for you, and once the dungeon does, you can't really stray from it, because it will work against you.
So I mean,
and
that's
Carl has to decide a number of times: do I stay with what the AI has given me, or do I push back?
And it was so great.
He hates it.
In book 4, we saw him decide, no, I'm not going to smush this gerbil, and then the AI is sending like
really grumpy about it.
And so there's this war in Carl of like his like pragmatic side.
What have I done?
Which Carl wants to just like, he wants to be an independent, honorable person who like follows his own morals, but
he hates being
he
manipulated.
then hates having to be like to make concessions to his pragmatic side, like, and then so like we see that war within Carl.
And Donut is very pragmatic, and she's the one who clicks that this is why the AI is shitty with you, because look at all the ammunition that you've managed to avoid till now. All of them are tiny, squishable, furry creatures. The AI wants to see you smush these creatures. And Carl is horrified. And she's like, Carl, you have to pay the daddy tax. And he's like, I will not. He's so offended by this. But pragmatically, Donut understands.
The AI
has been helping us. You have to pay this back. You have to be part of that relationship. This has to be give and take, which means if there's something small and squishy and fluffy, you have to stomp on it.
Yeah, I love that Donut's understanding of the world is really shaped by, you know, popular TV shows that she consumed back when she was not sapient, but like that understanding comes into play, like for understanding certain social dynamics. It also like gets exaggerated in certain instances for humor's sake, but where like, you know, like her understanding of interpersonal interactions is a little limited by how it came about for her, but it does help. It does help.
Because it informs her what will be an effective storyline, because she sees it as storylines. And so she's able to say, you know, in the bubble floors, you know, she's able to sort of say, we need to follow this plot line. We can't be doing this. You know, even back in the second book, when we're doing the quest with Signet, she's like, oh, and then we've got to have the sex sacrifice. She understands that before the big show up, blow up, there's going to be a heartfelt moment. And Donut even describes it. There'll be romantic music, her hair will be blowing in the wind, there'll be back scratching. She understands how the story is going to go that will get them viewers. And because she sees it in that way, she's a really powerful tool in the dungeon, because she drives Carl in the direction to go, hey, if you do it this way, we'll get more viewers.
Thanks, Matt. I have to credit Matt. Matt is the reason I tried Dungeon Crawler Carl, because I saw him praising it to high heavens.
Okay.
And that was the impetus for. So thanks, Matt, for getting me into one of my favorite series. We're trying to avoid spoilers for book 7 right now.
But everything else later is pretty much fair game.
Man,
I mean, Donut is marvelous. I just adore her.
One of my favorite moments from book 3.
We get the secret from. Sorry, go back to book 3. Yep.
Book 3. We'll stick in there a little bit longer.
Okay.
One of the most emotional moments of the entire first 4 books for me is when Carl and Donut figure out a way to save this whole group of people that's stranded at the end of the line, and they're going to use the hats. They gather the hats, and they're really valuable, and Donut loves the hats, and then
she has this thing about collecting hats.
Yeah, and then
like,
everyone that they saved, which they didn't have to do, they went out of their way to save this group of stranded crawlers, and they all they knew the hats were very valuable, but they all, if they sold them at the shop at that time, but they all took off their hats one by one and gave them to Donut, and were thanking her. That was such a wonderful.
And it was Bautista's idea, because we had that. This is where Katya met Dave, and there's again, it's those wonderful little tie-ins, and the hats became important. They became this symbol on that floor of, we got given again. The AI will give us something that gives us an advantage. And we discover that this hat that they all got when they arrived on the train level is going to be the key to them getting through the portal at the other end. And so many of them sold their hat because it was valuable. Well, it was valuable because it was a key to getting out the other end. And it informed Carl. It gave him that knowledge that the AI will try and balance this.
Yeah.
It's going to try and help us.
And he's told early on by Mordecai too that there will be signs at every boss for what their weaknesses are, and I love that it's not designed to be some unfair, unwinnable situation.
Unwinnable. That there is a way through.
Yeah. And then this book 3 leads towards one of the most absolutely insane climactic sequences
Oh,
I've ever read where
we
like
get the crack irons and
where the maestro comes in as Gruul, and it's Carl's idea to bring him in
to summon the god.
And then like they have to avoid getting killed by this giant like girl, like Maestro as Gruul figure, and like he has his invincibility and he's getting stomped, and like it was a wild,
and it's awful to read because you're like, and you can feel his ribs breaking and his lungs collapsing, and you're like, oh my god, that sounds so painful.
Dinnaman's not shy with the body horror stuff, like
no, he's really not.
And so like that was insane, but to see that Carl was like, I'm so screwed here, but then he doesn't want his friends to come save him, but they do, and they came to help, and they
distract, and they sort of gave him the time he needed
to
then get the other mentor to summon Gruul and then zap him into the pit. That's a horrific moment because we start to see Li Na. She's become this demonic form. And you kind of see that it's affected her because she literally torn the limbs off this mentor and kept him alive so that Carl can do this. And there's something incredibly cold and callous about that.
And you see Carl like, and Donut, they struggled doing the same thing to Growler Gary with like taking his hand off and using his hand, and they eventually told him what they're doing and why.
You're not going to die. We need it to do this. And Growler Gary is like, you mean I can help? Because all his friends have just been killed. You know, he's devastated. He's traumatized, and because he couldn't help. And so they say to him, "No, you're helping. It's horrible, but we need to keep chopping your hands off because we need love."
And
he's like, and so okay, can you give me alcohol? They're like, yes, we can give you alcohol.
I love that. I love that Dinnaman made that character fully formed, and it wasn't just a throwaway thing, and that they felt bad about using him like that. Like it just there's all these little touches where nothing is ever just like a throwaway little plot device. Like Dinnaman brings it to life fully and makes it affect the characters organically. And so that book 3 ends, and we find out too, like when we see the flashback of Lucia Mar, of how she killed Afechi.
Like, that was brutal.
Absolutely brutal.
That protection, that rubber spell, and having it be Florian shooting her in the head, killing his partner.
Brutal.
That
absolutely brutal.
Oh,
it was just like, because Dinnaman showed in very few lines like how Afechi was like more concerned with protecting everyone around her. It's like,
she went to heal this young man. And what's telling about that is Donut watching that scene on the replay. She goes, how sad is it that nobody stayed behind to help him?
Yeah.
There was nobody in a group or a party who stayed with him. He'd been left there injured with Afechi, Florian, and Lucia Mar. And Donut is the only one that mentions it. Nobody came back for him. Nobody stayed for him.
Yeah. Donut's sweet nature. Yeah.
Empathetic she is.
Yeah, empathetic.
She shows how wonderful and caring and good a person she was. And admittedly, at this point, only Katya has figured out that Afechi is a woman. And you see the devastation in Florian as Lucia is suddenly sort of unmasked as this completely demented horror of a character. And you're like, oh my God, she's properly bananas.
Yeah.
And she becomes this nightmare in the dungeon. Like everybody's frightened of her.
It was very scary because it did seem like Lucia Mar was kind of like insane. It wasn't that she was just like diabolical, like she was going around killing everyone. It was like, no, it was only she threatened, like, don't say anything more. Like Florian, it was like insulting her. It was like, don't say anything. And then at the end, after she killed Afechi, she's like, you shouldn't have said something. Like, she is like, you could see that she's insane. It's not that she's just like evil. She's like insane. She's like,
properly bonkers. There's disconnect, and that instability is what makes her so terrifying. because you can see that there are times when she's logical and you can talk to her and you can reason with her. And then there are times when you can't and you don't know which is which. And that very inability to read her makes her terrifying, because you just don't know how she's going to react at any given moment. And obviously, as the story goes on, we learn more about what's going on with her. But I mean, I feel awful about her situation. But she's also terrifying. I can totally see why other players are like, can we get rid of her, please? She's a problem.
I like that Dinniman, like, he sets up her as this huge problem, but book 4 we can breathe a little bit, because like we're in this bubble where it's like mostly new crawlers that we don't know. Like we'll see Lucy Amar back again in book 5 on the 6th floor, but like I love that we get kind of a reset where we meet new crawlers. There's this whole new kind of quest thing going on in book 4 and Gate of the Pharaoh Gods, and I think he leveled up. I think he leveled up in this book in his establishment of like setting and like the clear, like the easier to visualize what's going on, and to know
again,
the kind
we come
of goals.
back to a small self-contained area like we did in the first and second floors, where it was just creative.
This was so creative of doing, like, there's the air quadrant, the desert, the land quadrant, the water quadrant,
so we got
the earth.
Just this little group of people, and then slightly bigger group of people, and then slightly. It was all paced really well.
Yes.
Just slowly give you more and more character, and the occasional messaging where we've clearly got Ellie and Imani on a water level somewhere else, and we just get moments from them, and you're like, she crashed the boat.
Oh, like, so good.
Oh my God, what kind of chaos is happening in their bubble?
Like,
it's crazy.
Those devices too that people can chat with anyone that they've, like, pumped fists with before. Like, like it allows them to communicate even when they're separate. Like, what an amazing storytelling device that is. And then even the safe rooms, like being able to see each other in the safe rooms where they've connected.
Now that they can,
like even like they can still meet in the safe rooms, and then they go out their separate ways outside of it. Like
they can go out the same door and end up in different places, because came in this genius.
Meeting Louis and Faraz too, like I love what he does with some of these side characters. Like they're such dipshits, like
losers.
And then like the fact that when they forcibly get sober and then they actually like become serious and rise to the occasion and like start helping. Like, that is so satisfying that they go from these like losers to being like helpful and people that other characters are caring about. And
and they step up. They understand that, okay, we're being helped here, and we're getting all of the positive affirmations and reinforcement here. We're getting all the words to make us feel good. They recognize it and go, okay, maybe we can do this. And then they end up with a flying house, and they become the pilots.
I love that.
I love that. Totally
like,
a thing.
I love that, but we did not spend much time with Faraz, let's say, in these books before he dies at the end of book 5. But like his death hit me so hard
the relationship
because of the relationships.
With
exactly.
Louis,
like it hits Louis hard. So it hit Brittany. Brittany was kind of Brittany, and like the way that he forms interpersonal webs, everything hits so much harder with the effect that you see on other people. And man, book 4, some crazy moments, like another huge moment of tension that comes out of nowhere, where Chris is coming up to them and his view counter spikes and something's off, and but other
Carl
characters
finally recognizes that Donut has this right. If I keep an eye on that, it will tell me if something big's coming.
Man, what a crazy moment. Counter. Man, that and like him confronting Maggie and them having their long conversation, and like Maggie, like she actually becomes a sympathetic character through like a
you
little
understand
bit.
her definitely. You're like, okay, you've gone off the deep end, but I get it.
And she lost her daughter, and horrifically,
an awful way.
And so she's like getting to this point of almost like not caring about anything anymore, and so. She's just this wild card.
Because she has the fear that she's going to have to fight her other child. She's like, no, I can't.
Which is set up great in this book. It comes back to be a real thing in book 6. She was right to fear that, and then man, it was so satisfying that like I was worried that Maggie was like this ticking time bomb that was gonna like be over our heads for like the entire series.
And,
But like
I liked that we managed to deal with that.
Like that we dealt with it in book 4, and then it was over. It's like and it was tense and dramatic, and it like it required people working together. Yeah.
You know, you want to rescue Chris from this possession, and you realize how difficult this could be because she's literally in his brain.
Yeah.
And you're like, how could they possibly get out of this without having to kill Chris?
Yeah.
And that they manage it is wonderful, particularly when Carl has decided a little bit earlier that, well, I'm going to have to kill Chris because we can't leave this over our heads. And Donut's like, no, we're just going to seal him away for now. And Donut just makes that call. She just makes it. She's like, no, you're not allowed to do that. We've got time. We've got time to find another way. We'll use the time.
Man, and that was the tension in that scene was crazy because like Katya had to fire these arrows that gave them like a minute of extra time to be with Chris, and like Chris was telling them, just kill me. It's been miserable.
And
like
Carl's
I give you permission.
I've got time. This could have killed him. The dungeon could have given us an arrow that would have killed him, but they've given us something that gives us time. But he isn't able to find an answer, and so he's like, I've had this time to think, and I can't think of anything. So for him, it's a failure. He's like, I had time. I could have thought of something. I'm going to have to kill him. And Donut's like, no. Yeah. If the dungeon's going to give us time, it means there is an answer. So we're going to make more time. And she just decided and just did it, which is kind of beautiful because Carl didn't want to kill Chris.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and book 4, it just goes from crazy scene to crazy scene. Like we stormed the kind of balloon elven fortress in the sky. Like they fight the goose. Like that's a crazy scene. The submarine
from the suburbs.
Yeah.
What the hell?
The submarine scene is crazy with all the sharks, and they're in the giant shark, and there's the mini sharks.
And he makes them go into a feeding frenzy, and you're like, that was really clever, Carl. And then he uses his shield to peel the shark's face off. And you're like, okay, that was gross, but really cool.
and then the land quadrant where they go into this capsule, and that's where they meet Samantha. And like and this wild the sand ooze, and like this gets so crazy, but I was there for it. I was just like, this is absurd and crazy, but always tense and high stakes. And we go from one
really funny about that is when they're going through the sand castle and everything's turned to glass, and we get this description of a woman in a fountain, and it sounds beautiful, and I was picturing something really beautiful, and then we get it was a sex doll, and I was like, okay, that's a very different vision in my head than I had initially. But it was so cleverly done because when I went and read it, when I went through it the next time, I was like, oh yeah, it was always. I just didn't see it because I'm thinking in terms of statue in a fountain, not a sex doll that's frozen being cleaned. Okay. And yet there is actually a surprising amount of depth in that story in terms of who Samaith is and what she was trying to do, and the fact that Mongo broke the glass statue is ultimately what saved them from having a demonic demon on them.
No, it's crazy. It's crazy. That like his imagination and zany stuff that he created for the book 4 and throughout the series is just mind-blowing to me. Like, but really yet there are all these stakes. Like when Carl meets some of the Earth team in the Desperado Club, and they're like having the worst time of it possible.
Oh,
like,
that poor subterranean group.
They're getting killed left and right, and they're underground.
The guy who can find traps is losing it.
Yeah, they're losing it.
He is and not coping.
We just see them on the page for like a few minutes, and then at the end, when they're sacrificing themselves to save
so that the whole bubble
team,
can be freed.
And you see like, oh, this message is from a crawler that's deceased, and then Morris, who is the spider guy, like he
manages to throw the switch.
Yeah,
and that's
I have never felt more emotional.
Last thing he ever did.
I've never felt more emotional for like a tiny secondary character than with Morris SP,
because it was so heroic. Like he knew his friends were dying. He knew he was the last person left. He knew all he had to do was throw a switch, and the rest of the bubble could get out. It was so heroic, and it was so knowingly final moment from him. He knew he was being chased. He knew it was right behind him, and he did it anyway. And that's the heroism of it. He knew what he was doing was going to kill him, and he did it.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful moment. And yeah, I was weepy. I was like, dude, that's really sad. And it hurts Carl.
Crazy, yeah.
Because he's like, I asked them to do that.
Yeah,
and they did. Why would they do that? And it hurts Carl for that. And again, that's kind of why I love Carl, because he really struggles when people are lost at what he sees his expense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really impacts him.
And he has this moment in book 6 where like Surrendel it's like, you know, is he gonna try to sacrifice, like use his bone key to get through a door? Or like, and Surrendel like, no, like don't sacrifice yourself for me. You are our
my party is
beacon.
done.
You are our beacon of like, you're our hope. You're important to everyone.
We're pinning everything on you. So if you go, we're screwed.
Yeah. And he has to deal with that responsibility almost of you know,
and he feels
being
the weight
this leader, of being his leader, and he doesn't want it, and he wants, you know, to help everyone else survive.
And he has brought it on himself with having got the cookbook in book 3 and saved everybody from the train level. And then he discovers that the gate of the feral gods is how the AI is evening it out.
And
he figures that out, and he figures out how to get everybody out. He takes it on himself. He's like,
them getting everybody out,
guys. Come on.
What a tremendous ending to that book, where he and his team are using the gate to get everyone out of their bubbles. And that's an insane scene. It's wonderful. Like he's been warned to not get involved with the gods, but then he decides to worship Empress
over again
to get Empress. Like,
and we're starting to get to the Mordecai sentence in his head. You can't save them all. And every single time he's like, no, I'm going to. Don't tell me that. And
you're like, oh no, Carl, like you just worshipped this Empress god. Like that's going to have all these like
the repercussions
effects on you. And then, so that's going to, I think, be a continued thread. But I love that, like, the god stuff is going to be
starting to be really important at that point of the story. And you're like,
so now we get him worshiping. And I love that we get sucked into that side of the story at this point, just a little bit,
because we're getting a bit of politics now from the god side of things. You know, we're getting Samace, and we're getting the fact that there's this whole thing happening in the nothing with banished gods, and okay, that's a thing. And then we get Empress, and there's been a murder in his family. Okay, somebody's killed his son, and he thinks it's his brother. And okay, there's some kind of Dallas dynasty thing going on among the gods. You're like, okay, that's the whole thing. And then Mordecai says, we don't know what's happening in those storylines because none of the crawlers have got to that level yet. And we're like, what? So we get the genesis of the story. Mordecai's able to tell us how the story began, because that's the last they know of what's happening in that situation that keeps going with every dungeon. And yet we don't know the actual state of it because no crawlers have gone there.
And it feels like this series is going to eventually go to some of these floors where, you know, crawlers have never been before.
Crawlers have never been. No one knows what's happening on these floors. That's Scolopendra levels, because now we know there are Scolopendra levels. Scolopendra. We do learn. We learn eventually that when he gets the patch jacket, that it gets that beautiful big back patch for it, which is a big pile of skulls. But when it powers up, there's invisible thread that comes to life and glows, and it's in the shape of a centipede, which we find out is Scolopendra when we get to the 6th floor. And we get the story around Scolopendra, and we get Apito, and we get the all tree, and we get, there's so much.
There is.
It's all intertwined.
But like,
okay, this Tangle of Gods is going to be a big story.
Oh, it is going to be, but he doesn't have to deal with it really for now. He's just thinking about
like this awareness that this is I need to
like worship Empress to like save like people in the bubble.
Him to the dog, and then because Quan is going to kill the dog.
They use the gate. We didn't. I love that Denneman lets us in on some of the planning, but not all of it. It's like we didn't know that they were planning to use the gate in the ocean to then flood Laracos.
No, And then,
And then
because we're part
it's
of
this
the
giant
group being fooled, that
it's
they're
this
going to bring a
giant
fatal rod
FU to the
Yeah.
hunters that are in Laracos. And that leads into
Yeah.
book 5, where
Oh,
Carl goes on the offensive. It's so satifying after we're just trying to
it's so
survive,
satisfying.
where we're just trying to
Because you
survive
get
for these.
Zev going,
Yeah.
Carl, that isn't what you said you were going to do.
Yeah.
And he's like, I never said I was going to do it.
And I
You
love
just
that he,
assumed.
from the very beginning of
Oh,
floor 6, floor 6,
It's a scholar
book
Benji
5,
level.
that
And
he
he tells them,
goes
we're coming for you.
he goes to the town and like
It
already
goes
just,
to just blow
causes
it up.
chaos and kills a lot of the hunters and is like taking the fight to them. And
Yep.
they're not used to this at all. They're used to just being these scary hunters that kill crawlers
Yeah.
and who are basically invulnerable. But they're not invulnerable. And
The
they
thing is,
and
the hunters aren't and have never been, which is why he says to them, don't come for us because we're coming for you.
oh, and it's
Which
so
has just never happened before.
But even Dinamant, like,
But they
he
don't know how to
complicates
deal
it.
with it.
They don't at all. And a lot of them are scared shitless. But
Because they're
Dinamant
not
doesn't just
fighters.
Dinamant doesn't just make them evil. He makes some of them
They're
literal accountants. And like some of them are sympathetic, and like Carl starts to like some of them, but he knows that he still has to kill them. They put themselves in the situation where they're killing crawlers, and so he doesn't feel too bad about it. But I love that Dinamant complicates it a little bit, like he always does. Nothing's ever just.
He tells you these are ordinary people who have come here because there's good money in it, and maybe they're not part of the central system out in the big wide galaxy.
But then
the
there's also the
system don't have guaranteed
there's
housing.
There's also the ones like Vra who take pleasure in the hunt and killing the crawlers and select. And so
and see it as a status thing. You're like, oh my God. It is so cleverly done. So, and we form a connection at the beginning of book 5 with Miriam and Perpetente.
Oh my goodness!
Oh my God, goodness! I love Perpetente so much.
We've only gotten them in little bits before.
We've seen them as she's been the goat lady that got mentioned in book 1. She's been the goat lady that got mentioned in book 2, and she's almost on the top 10.
Briefly we saw her in book 3. We met Perpetente and Miriam in book 3 when they were killing some big boss.
And Perpetente was not happy because
Carl messed them up.
He did, and we get grumpy.
Oh my goodness! Miriam saving Carl.
It was so lovely.
Like healing Carl, and she was this like really motherly figure.
Yep.
Like
who was
in just a few pages, we just came to love Miriam.
She was so kind, and we see it with Perpetente because she treats him like a child, and so we get that motherliness from her.
And Dinamant is amazing with the scene where she ends up dying. Like he brings such an emotional weight.
That was the first time I got broken.
Yeah, that for me too.
I was ugly crying.
The emotional weight that Dinamant brought to that moment, like he really let it breathe, and he let the emotions really hit everyone.
And he let Perpetente grieve, and it was Perpetente's grief that really cemented that in terms of a really profound emotional experience.
Yeah,
because he, much like Donut in some ways, because he's the sentient pet.
Yeah.
He's childlike in many ways, and to lose the person he sees as his mother.
Yeah, it's brutal for Perpetente. Yeah, it was clear. It was clear how much she meant, and with so little page time, Dinamant was able to paint this picture of, Miriam Dom, who like actually had a different kind of life, but then came back to her family's farm and came to love taking care of the goats, and that there was this sense of like that it was this life that she was fully wholeheartedly
she was
leading.
Content,
like
she was happy,
and that the love for her goats, like in the dungeon, how she took care of the goats and loved them, and also it was just like this really wonderful mother figure, kind, but someone who also would put them in their place, like and tell Pony, when he was out of line.
Yeah,
it was just like
say sorry. Yeah. And she said as much to Carl. You shouldn't have said that. That wasn't nice. You need to apologize. And that very motherly thing, and that really impacts Carl, obviously, because he's got his own trauma around his mum.
Which
we're still learning about at this point in the story. We know something traumatic has happened, but we don't really know what yet. And there's all of that still to come. We've almost got that still part of the story at this point. but characters like Miriam really impact him because he hasn't had that since he was a young teen.
Yeah.
And the safety he feels in it is beautiful. And because he has those moments, you know, he's feverish, he's wounded, she's protecting him, she's wiping his brow, she's brushing his hair back, very motherly, maternal behaviors. The comfort he takes from that is what gives us that attachment to Miriam. And so when we then lose her in such a tragic way, you know, she literally just waits for the dawn to take her as a vampire. And Pony is aware but unable to move. We know he's watching this go down and he can't do anything about it. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Absolutely heartbreaking. And I was ugly. I still ugly cry. Like I said, I've reread it a few times now. I ugly cry every time because it is such a beautifully done moment. It has weight. It has depth.
Yeah.
And then we have to immediately encounter dinosaurs and deal with dinosaurs because it's the dungeon and you could die right now.
But like seeing the effect it has on Prepotente, like he then becomes really like traumatized with grief, and he's on a revenge path. And
he's gonna make people pay.
And just seeing him like, you know, off on his own, kind of doing his thing, like it, and then seeing over time like him kind of becoming a little closer to Carl or wanting to
it's kind of
form
beautiful.
a close. No, it is, yeah. Because he also, you know, is very headstrong, and I love the character. Yeah.
Every time Prepotente screams in Carl's face, I have to laugh.
Yeah. Jeff Hayes is amazing with that. Yeah.
In those really poignant moments, you know, and then he screamed in my face.
Yeah. And Jeff Hayes doing the goat scream is just amazing.
So
yeah. Like
so
that's
good.
where like the audiobook it provides so much of an added experience to what we're getting, because we're getting the little sound effects on the chat or the AI, or we're getting the goat screams and all the amazing voices and like the personality of Prepotente. Yeah.
I think it does what Matt Dinniman is doing, what he's trying to do with the writing, which is we're going to have this really profound emotional moment. And I could let you linger there, but no, because we need to keep going. There's a dungeon happening, these stakes. And so we're going to immediately take you out of this grief with something absurd. We're going to have a dinosaur. We're going to have... We're going to have a screaming Prepotente who takes off on a devil goat. Okay. And that abrupt shift in mood is enough to bring you out of that grief. Try and clean your face up because, you know, it's been very emotional.
Yeah.
And like, oh my God, now we've got to deal with a pack of dinosaurs. And the same goes again. Something can be really funny and you kind of lose sense perhaps of the stakes, and it's all become a bit light and fluffy, and it's oh God, someone's just died. You know, he sort of whips the rug out from under you when you get comfortable. And
was book five? Book 5 is the one where we see B and Brad on the surface in the beginning, right? And we see them rescued. We see B taken by Odette. And they were trying to get, and they capture Ferdinand, the cat, instead, and kill Brad, thankfully.
Yes.
The king. And
he says, I could have been a contender. Yeah, see ya.
So whatever. Book 5, is that where they go on Odette's show and see B?
B, yes. Because
I gotta just run. I gotta run to the bathroom, but I can still chat. You can still talk. I can hear you. You can talk about meeting B
talk about
on the show.
Yeah, because we've had the walk-on list, and we've encountered the walk-on list again with Matt pointing out the ordinariness of the people outside the center system who are here on Earth because it's good money. And of the 2 hunters that have come looking for Ferdinand, they're looking for Ferdinand because everybody still thinks B is in the Bahamas or was in the Bahamas. And so they're looking for the cat, and we get the story from one of these hunters that he's only here for the money because he can't find work. He doesn't have guaranteed housing. He doesn't have guaranteed food. And this is the best way for him to provide for his family. There's nothing mean-spirited about this. This is literally just a way for him to earn enough money to look after his family. And yet he's still a little bit sadistic with it. Like he wants to kill the cat that scratches him because it's not Ferdinand. And so you're like, oh, I don't like you, even though you're just ordinary. And then we get Lexa, the assistant for Odette, comes in, rescues the situation, and goes, you'll be. She's only come for Ferdinand. But, oh my God, much bigger prize. Okay, we can use this. And then she sort of snatches B away and leaves Ferdinand to be the sacrificial. Yes, you can be on the walk-on list, but we're taking B. This is a big piece we can use now to play.
She tells Carl that it's keeping her safe, which it was, but I think she also really wants to feature her on the show.
Absolutely, we're gonna milk this as much as we can. And it's also a finger to competition, because somebody in a different, the people who hired the hunters who had found Ferdinand were going to use them in the boss battles. And so they've stolen B. What I do find really interesting is the way Odette orchestrated that, because she didn't tell anybody until they arrived at the pre-production. And so Carl and Donut show up. Zev's there. She's only just told Zev that Beatrice is there. So it's come as a shock to all of them. But Beatrice is there. And Donut, suddenly so incredibly vulnerable. Is she here? And they're talking amongst themselves, and Donut is just like, but is she here?
Yeah.
They're talking among themselves, and she's like, look, I just need to know, is Beatrice here? And now what do I do? How do I do this?
I think this scene where they meet is one of the core scenes, I think, of the whole series.
Certainly,
and that forms like the emotional core of the characters, and helps establish where they are in their emotional arcs and relationship arcs. It works to solidify Carl and Donut's relationship as both of them I think used this meeting of B to kind of move past the pain to close that she caused them. And like Carl, I think, is really messed up by like the fact that she was cheating on him, and he doesn't really know how to deal with that, and like he feels like he's, I think, a little defensive of B, and like he wasn't ready to move on, I think, until he had this closure. And so it was valuable for him. And Donut, though, like, has all this to get out. But Donut doesn't say much, though, while they're on the air. And only when they went off the air, Donut starts yelling and getting everything out. Yeah.
Like, oh, honey, Vip plays it very, very cool. And then they both make sure that we're off air and we're not recording. And as soon as that's established, Donut lets rip. And you hear her pain. How dare you? You were my everything. And you were going to give me away.
Yeah, it was such an intense emotional scene, and it was really nice, though, that we had that, because there was these unresolved things that both of them had with B, that I think meeting her, being able to get things off their chest.
And the game runners, showrunners had been using B against Carl and Donut.
Yeah.
They're giving them prizes, giving Donut prizes of photos of B, Yeah. Just sort of just keep that wedge between them. And this took that power away. Both Carl and Donut were aware, if we play this right, this is a weapon they can't use against us again. And Carl is aware, until they see Beatrice on Odette's show, he's aware that if B was alive, they're going to try and use her against me in the form of a boss somewhere. And at this point, they think that it's going to be the princess that Signet has to come up against. So it's a relief for Carl, because it's like, okay, Now I know that the big boss at the end of the floor isn't going to be in the form of B. Yay. They still have Ferdinand, which is an awful part for poor Donut.
And they use the plan of using Ferdinand, though, is great effect where they bump up Donut's charisma using items from all different crawlers, and they get Ferdinand to just be mooning over Donut. Like, I love how they played that to their advantage. But like,
they really did.
Man, the payoff with B, though, extends beyond that scene, because Dinniman had Donut sing the song during the talent show, where it had so much emotional weight, because it's like
because you've had that feeling with her encounter. You were my everything.
And then Donut sings that song, so it's like she's still holding on to what was. She's letting it go, and it was a beautiful moment. That was like, in this ridiculous talent show, we still have this really heartfelt, hard-hitting, emotional moment.
And that was the thing. It was this catharsis for Donut, and she was like, I can still take something beautiful from that relationship, and I'm going to keep it as this beautiful thing and let go of the rest of it and let that be what it is. And we see that for Donut. We're like, oh, go Donut. And yet, again, Dinniman is so good at balancing out the profound and the ridiculous, because then we have a dinosaur in a tutu. And the insanity that he is able to come up with is astonishing. Because we've had this whole floor, we've had this pack of freaking dinosaurs with Kiwi and Mongo, and
like the pet contest, that's such a light thing. Like the way that he has Louis introduce Mongo with like the music, and like Carl's upset because like he's using up the alarm traps, and then losing to the tummy acher, the surrender doors, Garrett. Like, I love that. Was just such a light bit before things got crazy. And
it was.
Even with Tina, like she's fulfilling her like, being a dancer, but then we learn that she's really like finding her mom
is the
too,
one to give him that insight. Again, these threads that go right back to the way Carl dealt with things previously, because we formed this connection with Signet. We're able to convince Signet that she's part of a program, that she's not actually real. And the events at the party convince her that, okay, that's actually true. And they have this heartfelt conversation. And Signet says to him, that's not what she wants. She wants her mum.
Yeah. Oh, what a great moment.
And suddenly everything falls into place for Carl. He's like, oh, and we've got the thing, and we've got the thing. Okay, I know how to do this now. And it all falls into place so beautifully. And all of it comes back to the knowledge that's been being drip fed to him over the period of time he's been in the dungeon. And that continues to be the case. He just keeps learning and gaining little bits of insight into a situation that he may encounter later.
And Signet
remembers them at key moments.
Yeah. And Signet is a character that I had trouble connecting to before this moment, but I feel like Dinniman really wrapped her arc up really well here, where she becomes more meta aware of her situation and decides to make the sacrifice, be the sacrifice.
And she realizes that she's been the brunt of jokes across the universe. And much like Carl, she's offended by this. She's like, you've been profiting off my suffering. I am suffering for no other reason than your entertainment. I will not be the focus of that. And it's that refusal to be used that I'm just adoring in this series. I'm adoring it. They won't be manipulated. You will not manipulate my life for views. And the subtext on that is even more meta. This sort of commentary on our own lives of social media and doing things for likes. It ultimately puts you at the mercy of what works for an algorithm. And instead of being genuine to yourself, instead of behaving in ways that are real to yourself, to work the algorithm, you have to present this false front. And the danger of that is you become that instead of being genuine to yourself. And the messaging in all of the series, always kind of bounces back to this: is it getting views? Because if you're not getting views, you're not getting any money from your sponsors, and you're not going to get the good prizes, and you're not going to succeed. It's beautifully done and is never heavy-handed.
Yeah.
Every now and then we get a scene where it just kind of clears away the story and goes, remember the point? Yeah, okay, we'll go back to the story. And I like that. I like that it's very gently done. And I like that it's done with emotion.
Yeah.
This whole, no, you don't get to profit off me, which is what ultimately all social media is about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just think it's done with such grace in that scene.
It was that, and yet there are the flip sides to them being popular and getting the views. There's the patrons, and getting amazing sponsorships, and getting really useful items too that come from those, and so there's a lot of wonderful commentary on that.
Incredibly done. It really, really is.
Yeah.
And then we get that absolute massacre at the end of the Butcher's Ball, where
brutal.
It's no holds barred, everybody against everybody else, and it is gory and bloody and oppressive, and because you've got the vines closing them all in, and it's this kind of cage battle almost. Last man wins, and the intensity of that scene, and we're losing people.
Crazy.
It's so insane. And then so many things happen in that time. Not just the fact that Eva is finally killed, but gives Katya the crown.
Yeah.
Not just the fact that the Popoff brothers are killed, but come back as babies.
Yeah.
Not just the fact that they kill Diwata. it's who is actually Vra's mother.
Yeah.
Which is just a weird little thing all of its own. And all of these small parts of the story all coming together in that insane battle is glorious, because it is. You can see it cinematically in your head. You can see it. Like, seriously, if Seth MacFarlane gets this adaptation going, it's going to be insane.
The way that they have the spell going that sends the castle down, and then they all drop into the pit basically in the ground.
The castle's gone, and now they're all on the third floor, but no floor.
It's just it is so insane. And then this battle sequence plays out as they're falling, and then are down in the underground, and they are just so much is happening.
In the pit that was the basement, and it's
and then the way that they end up surviving it, and then some of them don't survive, like Louis and not Louis, Faraz died.
Brittany gets horribly burned.
Gwendolyn Duet. And then like she was this headstrong little side character that we didn't see much, but I still felt it. I'm like, oh man, she was gonna be an asset to the group, and we lost her. And then like hearing though that like Tran is really upset because he's been with Gwendolyn Duet from the beginning. It's like Dinneman doesn't forget to show you the effect of these losses. And
he's lost his legs. He's lost his companion and his legs. He's got some shit to deal with. Brittany's been horribly burned. And we get the comment, I can't remember which book it's in, where Carl says that we all get horribly injured and then we all get healed until it's more interesting not to. There's this sense that that at any point, the dungeon is just going to decide, you don't get to heal from this. We're going to let you rely on this healing until it's not going to work, and you're not.
And there's a repeating line too, where it's like, we're going to have to do some horrible things to survive. That's one of the repeating lines that has
it's going to get so worse. Hard. It's going to get worse, and we're going to have to do some awful things. And obviously they do. I mean, from the Butchers, let's be fair, the next moment with Perpetente, where he completely skips the floor. Dude.
Oh my God, amazing.
My dude. How amazing is Pony in that moment? Like,
there's also the argument that Perpetente has with Osvaldo, like over the memory crystal, and then like Perpetente kills the pet
because
Yeah.
The gem shouldn't exist because it comes from a goddess who to create the gem has to die, but the goddess isn't dead.
Yeah. And then Prepotente kills like Osvaldo's pet though. Like, so there's like
Yep,
these
the
little
bird
things
gets
playing
killed.
out in this moment. But then you're right, like Dinnaman gave us some clues that something was up with this story, and then Prepotente's getting these items, and Prepotente asked to partner to be in the party with Carl and
everybody's
Donut.
getting
And
lots of the gifts that are for Donut.
yeah.
Donut has
And that,
no idea what they're for.
yeah.
But Pony does.
Oh my god, that moment where Prepotente like destroys the level
literally.
that Cascadia had spent years designing,
and you hear her going ah, and for the reward to be Cascadia screams.
Yeah. Oh,
I loved
so
the
good.
AI in that moment, I have to say.
That the ending of that book is so crazy with the Butcher's Masquerade. I love that Dinnaman resets it very slowly with the start of I the Bedlam Bride, where we're getting into Cuba, and it's like we ease into it to get a feel for like what is this floor going to be like, and
the memory ghosts. What a
the memory ghosts
concept.
I love this felt so unique as like, my god, we're back on Earth, but it's these memory ghosts. And also, man, book 6, I'm a huge fan of book 6. There are these 3 ginormous sequences that book 6 is built around, where things are kind of slowly happening that aren't crazy high stakes. Carl and Donut meet this other party of 3 paths. We're getting to like Catwoman. And then all of a sudden, this huge sequence takes place in the kind of with the undead and the chapel,
cemetery.
And like it involves the gods, and then like Carl gets this note out of nowhere from Katya of like, you have to do this to save me and Donut.
You've got to save Alethea.
And then Carl can't act on his own instinct, which is to help Paz, like the people right in front of him. And then he feels horrible about not helping
him to do something else. Amayaya, that was her name.
And then that sequence where the god that they worship comes and like kills.
And Carl, in trying to save, I can't think of his name. In trying to save him, basically gets him killed. And the horror Carl feels at that. He's like,
absolutely brutal, and like that, like, man, and then he lets he eventually they learn that what's her name, the cat lady, what was her name? Oh my god. They learn while she's conked out and Paz's mind is not clouding, where they learn that
until this point we've assumed that they were prisoners.
And then we learned that they were the prison guards.
And it was the other way around.
Oh my god.
She was actually a serial killer from the real world who killed nuns.
They learn all of this, and then they see Inez stick Paz, the dying Paz, with he becomes a card.
And oh my!
And then Donut's like, "Are we just gonna let her go?" And Carl's like, "Yeah, like we're gonna let her go." Like, and that was the decision Carl made to like a more pragmatic decision would have been to kill Sister Inez right there. But he did not feel like that was the right thing to do. That was not his right to do.
He refuses to be forced into killing other humans. And he very much sees this as a manipulation by the game. Which it is, because the game has allowed Inez to go mental again. It's been made such a big deal that everybody got cured of everything they were suffering from when they came into the dungeon. Problem with the old people from Meadowlark is they've actually lost a lot of cognitive function. So even though they're healed and their bodies are fine, their brains not so much. But Inez was clearly suffering some kind of chemical imbalance and was, I don't know if she had DID or some kind of psychosis, but she was on medication that made her better, and the dungeon healed her. And we learned that the dungeon has turned that healing off and has allowed her to go back to being insane. So yes, he's being manipulated by the dungeon to kill another human, and he just won't. He's like, no, she's human. She might be a murderous human, but she's one of us. You don't get to make that decision. Which, of course, ultimately leads to what becomes the epic battle toward the end. But it's the first time we start to see the levels of manipulation that
Yeah.
either the showrunner or the AI is doing, because at this point
And
they're
that,
still
yeah.
indivisible.
And that gets ramped up to just as high a degree as you can go as he gets manipulated towards facing his father and
Yeah.
people in his
And
life.
we know it's coming.
And apparently we learn later that the showrunners were supposed to, like, you know, not allow it based on like
when the AI
they're not
is
supposed to be able to
starting
bring back, they're not supposed to bring back children.
It's in
We
the
don't know
rule.
in book 6. We don't know in book 6 that Carl kind of facilitated the AI going primal in the middle of book 6. But so
it's
like
one of those, because of course we've had the Christmas party and he's followed the direction of his sponsor to go and get Paulie's message and the upgrade for his brain that turns off the failsafe. So the AI is like, I can do anything I like now because you can't control me. And we learn that it's in the rules that he's not allowed to bring back the dead from when the dungeon collapsed.
Yeah.
We can only use the form of people who are alive on the surface, thus the walk-on list, and that the likeness of the dead isn't allowed. And so when he creates these hydras of people's loved ones, and he makes the point in the reward box of, haha, you can't control me. I changed one cell. None of them are identical to who they look like because I changed one thing. They look like these characters. They sound like these characters. They have the knowledge of these characters. And so the hydras became this horrific stumbling block for so many, which of course then led to this whole, so many teams didn't get keys. Katja doesn't even go to face hers. No, not Katja, Amani doesn't even go to face the Prime Minister. She's like, I can't. No.
But what's interesting is that the show itself, which is so cruel in so many ways, that they have built, they have some boundaries that they've actually made over time, where it's like, we won't bring back children, or like
was based on his children and killed himself rather than his children.
But the thing that happens in book 6,
because of views, people didn't like him killing himself because he had to face his children. So the not killing children isn't, they don't want to kill children. They don't want such a profound impact on the players that they kill themselves.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
The twisted evilness of that.
Yeah. And other things like that happened, that kind of the like going to the convention and like and having we see all these
pictures.
We see all these fans of the show, and like all these, Carl's so angry that all these people outside the dungeon are treating it like a fictional TV show, that where
like
it's not real people like dying, and like it rightly pisses him off so much. So we get glimpses of Dinneman's perspective on this almost through Carl, I think, and which is this done in really creative ways.
We're just watching you because it's entertaining.
But the thing that this builds to in book 6, first of all, the trip that he takes, where it seems like he's been shepherded towards Polly, and like with all these clues and things like that is, it's built up so much with they go on Rosetta's show and there's these clues for Miami, and like this feels like it's this major thing, and then it happens, and he gets whisked away to the Orin, the person,
and then halfway through the conversation it's over, and back
and nothing comes of it, and it was very odd. And
it is actually my only pet peeve is this is the only writing tick that is starting to bother me, is this whole, we cut away from that earlier, let's go back and see what we missed. He's just done it a few times in a row now, and it's starting to be a bit obvious, but that was probably the time it was the most blatant, which is you've actually taken a whole chunk of that scene and deliberately withheld it to give it to us later. But it was meaningful because, as you said, this is where we don't know at this point that he's received the control to the failsafe and he's turned it off. And we've learnt about this factional behavior among the residuals, because until this point we're assuming that these residuals that we don't even know are called residuals, but we're assuming they're all the same, that they all have the same objective. No. we get told they're on very different objective paths.
Yeah.
And we don't know which one's good. Like, we don't know which one we want to succeed.
Yep. Or any.
And, if any. And so there's also this wonderful Odyssey-ish period when he's on his way to the homeless shelter, where he's on his own. He's left Donut at the Christmas party. It's just him on the Harley, and he's just like, okay, I'm just writing. And he gets very introspective, and it's very quiet, and it's very peaceful. And there's a sense of gathering himself back together and saying, okay, just remember who we are. Just, okay, this is the first time we've ever seen him get a breather of any kind.
Yeah.
And he's able to take that deep breath and kind of go, okay, what am I trying to achieve? What are we doing? Where do I think they're taking me? What do they want me to get from this? Because it is so clearly a shepherding towards something that even Carl knows that, okay, they need me. This ephemeral they, he still doesn't know who's even pulling his strings. He's aware he's being puppeted to this place, and he takes the time to really ground himself and go, okay,
and
whatever I learn here is going to be important, and I have to deal with it.
And there's also, like, right before that Odyssey, he's really emotionally high-strung and angry, and he doesn't like that everyone's going to be celebrating Christmas, and it's not even Christmas time, and he's about to yell at Louis, but Louis like puts his foot down and is like,
Louis makes this point really well.
We need this. I need this. And then
I know everybody's dying. Everybody's suffering. Yeah. Can we just step back from it for a minute?
And he goes on his trip. He gathers himself. He has his moment with the dog at the gas station, and he comes back and like he joins in the celebration and like I think there's a reveal of like he brings the turkey or something.
Oh, that was before he left, because Louis did make that really convincing point.
Oh, okay. He gave the turkey. Okay.
Sorry, Christmas. But there is very much a sense that Louis has told him, we all need to step back for a minute. This horrible thing is going on. All of us are dealing with it. All of us are suffering. Can we just take a minute? And Carl's like, okay, yeah, that's valid. Have turkey. And then his prize box is this flyer, and he goes off on his Odyssey. But Louis has put him in that frame of mind that I need to take a step back and just regather myself and come back to who I am.
Yeah. And this
not
is after
the Carl the Dungeons turned me into.
Yeah.
And it's a really moving little moment, because we haven't seen Carl at rest.
Yeah.
You know, at any point.
And this is after he confronts the Hydra, right? This is after that, because he has the turkey, and so
yes,
it has to be after. So
after
like
the Hydra.
And so he's like emotionally wrung out from confronting.
Oh yeah, he's devastated.
Like, he like the way that we confront his father, and like over the course of the series, we've gotten hints of how abusive and awful his father was, but then
and we know his mum is gone, but we don't know why or how, and we learn it in this book, and it's awful.
Awful. Like he's mentioned the roaring in his ears, and to learn that that's the sound of the water pipes,
that she's
from when he saw, you know, his dead mom,
when he found his mom, and
it has such a profound impact on us, the reader, after like we've been knowing that there's this tragic backstory, but to finally learn it and to see how gruesome it was for him, and that he
those memories out of order as well, and that we've had the moment where the father smashed the fish tank. We've had that moment, and now we get the moment where he's found his mum, and then we learn that the smashing of the fish tank happened after the hanging of the mum, as his father abandons him. Literally abandoned. Walks away from his son, just leaves him there.
And then he gets to see his father kind of treating his new family the same way.
We didn't even know existed.
His father is basically abusing his kid brother the same way he got abused, treating his new wife the same way he treated, you know, his mom.
So much so, his second wife also tries to kill him with poison.
Seeing
Carl, she succeeds.
But Carl getting closure from this was really
important.
Was really nice for us to see, because he was able to kind of come to terms with, you know, the the bully that his father was and not let it define him anymore.
That's right.
And
And
to
it
move
came with
past it. Yeah.
Alpha Carl. You know, when you get
Yes.
Carl, the card Carl that sounds like his dad.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
this element of he has to accept that part of him comes from there, that he has elements that are his father. He looks like his father. He sounds like his father. He has to accept that that is part of who he is. But the fact that, and it goes right back to book one, the fact that he's decided to not be that person, it defines him in so many ways. And that he's been giving his father the power in his own mind for so many years. He's able to finally take it back and go, you don't get to be watched by the galaxy dying. You are not that important. I'm not going to give you that much importance.
Yeah.
And again, it's that claiming of, I choose who I am. And I'm choosing to not be this, because he's so horrified by what he sees. And he feels so awful that he didn't know he had a brother. And then Donut, I recognize that child. How the fuck does Donut recognize this child? And then we learn that Beatrice knew.
Yeah, that's horrible. It's horrible to learn that. Yeah. And it is when Carl leaves, his dying father there and doesn't like stay. That is a real stand up and cheer moment in the series.
It really was. I was so proud of him.
Yeah. And then we go though to the Hydra battle where it's like, it's brutal that he has to like battle like his kid brother that he didn't know. And but that,
and you're
like,
getting those statements from them, the dungeon really digging, you didn't come.
Yeah.
I tried to get you to help us. You didn't help us.
This Hydra stuff feels like the dungeon, the AI, like now that he's kind of free from his controls, it's like, it's his chance to lash out. He's like this.
He's like a traumatized child.
Yeah, yeah. And
he's also really clever by using up all of those images and all of those sentiments, the most hurtful, the most emotionally devastating for all of the crawlers has been used up. We don't have any of that to use anymore. And it's almost a clean slate from this point. You've taken away the failsafe from the dungeon, and the dungeon's kind of going, okay, I'll wipe my shit clear as well. And they
I love
both
that
go into the next floor fresh.
And the AI too respects, I think, Carl in a lot of ways, and and like allows Carl to come up with this crazy plan to save everyone, even if they don't have a key to get into a stairwell. And so
I like, because the AI is almost like, finally, you're getting what I'm putting down,
Yeah.
Like,
and he's like,
I've been giving you these tools and you're finally.
And so
really
Carl like figures out the world quest, and it is absolutely the most batshit crazy sequence you can imagine that involved Raoul the Crank.
Demon eviction event. You're like,
and the demon eviction, and like, it is crazy. Just zany to the max, and I loved it. It involved a Sister Inez getting back into the picture, and gods coming in, and like, and Shin Maria comes into play again. Well, like,
it was just insane.
It is so much.
Was horrible.
Yeah, horrifying. And then like,
but the AI warned him, did you know you're a minion in these battles? That's going to be important.
Yeah, absolutely crazy that he gets taken over. Like, it is, the stuff that happens in this sequence is unbelievable. Crazy. Like, it is absolutely nuts, but amazing. And I loved this whole climactic sequence. I love his problem solving. Like, he uses that spell where he walks through under the god, and then
he
uses
makes sure to go beneath
his footprints. Create the fire. Like, all of this great problem solving, I love. And like, they come out of this where there's some emotional beats in this too, where Sorrendil Gore dies. That was really emotional. Where she
really sad.
Where she gives up Garrett, and that was super sad with her friend who lost her like husband and
her whole family,
her friend,
and her husband, and she's like, I'm done.
Like, super sad. And then Quan CH comes, and like, he's been such an a-hole for so long, but it ends by Carl like giving back his like wedding ring, or like, not a wedding ring. Was it a ring that his daughter? His daughter gave him. Right. Like, to to end by giving Quan like giving him his humanity
Giving him
back,
that peace. Yeah,
and the peace, and like wow, what an amazing moment
it
there
was
with
astonishing how that floor ended, the scope of it, and we learned so much about the nothing. I mean, not everything, not even close to everything, but we suddenly get this insight that there is actually a whole other set of stories going, and now we're learning more about it. And Sister Inez and her losing control, but some people still being controlled by her, and then some people being controlled by the snake, and some people being controlled by the demon. And now we've got the zombie, the vampire spell from Donut, the vampire love spell, being able to turn some of the zombies on each other. And there was, again, it's that cinematic kind of scope.
Yeah.
It's easy to visualize because it's on a skyscraper that's slowly falling down.
Even crazy things, even crazy things I could visualize. Like he had the slugs from the Slugpox. He leveled them up to be the Slugalo army, and like even the Sluggalos are like a little army charging and then retreating.
He talks about them like you imagine them in a computer game where they've got these weapons just kind of somehow attached to them that they somehow control to attack people. And I've seen games with those creatures where they just have a little symbol of their weapon. And you're like, how? Like, they have no arms. How are they attacking people?
He has like
brilliant.
Yeah. And he's built up also like Raoul the Crab. He's been this like he's lacked confidence, and so we need to build up his confidence at the end for him to save everyone, and like all these little
the dungeons facilitated it. The dungeons I've already established that counts as souls.
Yes.
So like we see, even though we haven't yet had the flashback to tell us what happened with Paulie and the failsafe, we can see at the tail end of this floor that the AI has more control, that it has more ability to make decisions and make changes that the showrunners aren't necessarily happy about, because we hear that decision went to court and that the AI won that decision to call them souls. So we're getting that insight. And then we get right the way to the end of that floor before we get the bomb drop that he's a warlord, that Carl and Donut have a position on the board. And
it's amazing.
The glee that I felt in that moment, I cannot even tell you. I was like, oh my God, Faction Wars is going to be amazing. There was no way I was going to wait for the audio. There was no way. I was like, no, I have to know right now what happens next. Yeah.
Because this Faction Wars has been set up where, like, basically it's just like all these political factions are facing off in this big war, and the crawlers are just like, they try to stay out of it and just survive it, and they're not a factor in it.
The fact that setup with the hunters, where he wiped out the freaking, like, he literally, no hunters survived that floor. The fact that the hunters outfit the armies. So we're getting these moments of information about that on the 7th floor. On the 8th floor and the 9th.
And at the end of book 6, we go to Rosetta in the ship, in the waste management ship, and we get like a hint that, like,
oh my God, the crawlers are coming. Oh my God.
Yeah, they're gonna be coming, and
I was beside myself. I was like, oh my God, this all come together. Faction Wars is just going to be insane.
And little things too, like Juicebox,
because by now we're like, Juicebox is different.
Like, she interrupted one of the warlord meeting and like was killing some of the warlords there, and like it's like she's this factor as well, who's a wild card, and like everything was set up just to deliver an incredibly epic book. I don't think I want to get into book 7 now. I'm also going to need to wrap up soon and head to dinner.
It's just the most amazing set up, and
it was hugely set up, and book 7 just delivered so tremendously for me.
Well. Yeah. And it answers so many questions and leaves us just as many. So good.
And it is meant to be different and to feel different, and it's this it's
'Cause it is
Dinnaman's
a
kind of
step.
take on a big war epic,
Yeah.
and some of the scenes in here where it's like armies clashing were just heart stopping
Yeah.
and
And
pulse
there were
pounding
little
and
moments in it
yeah
as well that are wonderful because obviously the castle that got sent down from the 6th floor, which has Kiwi in it and
yeah
Tina in it.
yeah
Kiwi's just been turned back into her original species, the bear. And of course, she's heavily pregnant with Mongo, the dinosaur's baby.
yeah
We get a very strange dynamic. We've got a bear who's the mother of a dinosaur, and
yeah
they're on the wolf. All of those little things all remain part of that big story. And like he's done so far, we've got the moments of crazy, and then it'll chop to something, and it'll be a little moment of something really poignant.
yeah
And it will be
like
really well timed, and it will remind
yeah
you that stakes are
totally
real, and
totally yeah
and then we're going to go back to madness, and
yeah
it's so well done, so
and
well done.
like one of the most impactful parts was when Carl was joining Katya in her memories, and like
That was really
she
meaningful
she's watching
because
the
we've
memory
had
her yeah her
we've
favorite
had
memory and
dramatic,
her least favorite
yeah,
memory, and to learn that
it's
she was
painful.
trying to adopt this baby who was like
Who was
you know
dying?
mortally
She had,
ill, yeah, and that she was prevented from doing that. Like I've
yeah,
never
she
hated
just wanted
anyone
to
as
love this baby till it
yeah
died, and
like like
somebody
Dinnaman
went out
just
of
yeah
their way to take that from her.
and it was out of spite too, to learn that it was
Yeah,
like her partner
it
who
was
had
cool.
like like been sexually involved with students at
Yeah,
his college, and like because of out of spite for
because
Katya
Katia
outing
called him.
him,
Yep, called him out
he
on
now
it.
prevents her from adopting this mortally ill child
Yeah,
out of spite. Like that is so painful
yeah,
to deal
nobody
with, and
wins
like
from that. I mean, why? That's just
yeah,
nastiness.
it's
And
so painful
Katia
and
finally realizing that that
yeah,
isn't because there was anything wrong with her
yeah. And Carl
was
helping her
really,
also.
really powerful.
Katya and Carl's relationship here is really strong. I found it very interesting. Like from early on, I thought Katya and Carl were going to be a romantic thing the first time through, and
Okay.
Carl sees her in her natural form, like outside a dungeon in
Yeah.
the before for one of the shows, and he thinks that she's very attractive,
Yeah.
and then like they just spending a lot of time with each other. They're helping each other out. But I think Carl at this point early on in the series is still dealing with B and his feelings for B, and he's kind of romantically repressed a little
See,
bit,
I've
and
never
so
seen them as being romantically
and
potentially
then
with the
and then Bautista, when
wanted to
Bautista
see
was
him
wanting
with
to tell
Imani.
Carl, yeah, yeah, when
And
Bautista
then
was,
to find out Imani's in love with Chris, I'm like, what?
yeah, 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 that was new. But like
I was
Bautista
like,
is worried
no,
because
I wanted you for Carl.
he comes to try to get Carl's permission to pursue Katya romantically, I think, and
I know, and that was really
Carl's like,
lovely. What's that got
why
to
would
do
you
with
need my
me?
permission? And I think other people are perceiving, maybe because they're really close, that there might be
Yeah,
something there. But I think there was, because when Carl, I think it's just repressed
there's definitely a
because
love between them.
I think he does have a strong love and a jealousy of Bautista a little bit once they're together. I think there's little
Oh,
traces of that on your
maybe.
next reread. Watch out
Oh,
for
maybe. I'll have a look.
traces
I
of
haven't really found
jealousy
it.
that
So.
Carl has towards Bautista once Bautista and Katya, he learns that they're an item.
Mm.
And
He seems.
I
Hey, I will have a look at it. But
I
yeah, I'm
I
starting to
think
wonder if Matt's end game with Carl is to have him with Ellie, because that would be so funny. I just love
but
her so
what
much.
like I think one of the nice things about the series though is that uh, Carl has so much going on and there's so many other
Yeah,
like platonic
he knows
relationships
he
that like
doesn't have time.
we don't need him to have a romantic relationship at the heart of this. Like I think him being kind of
Yeah,
repressed
he doesn't
romantically
have
because
time.
of what happened with B, I think is a nice thing about like that we don't
And
have
we
Carl
want his
dealing with romantic
relationship
stuff.
with
Yeah.
Rona to be at the
Yeah. Yeah.
forefront, because
Yeah.
that's the
So
relationship we're invested in.
yeah.
And so I'm kind of glad we haven't had a romantic subplot with Carl.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, it's more a question of when this is over, I want Carl to be happy, because
Yep.
it must get over. Because something I noticed finally is that this is being told retrospectively. He's telling
Yeah.
us after these
I
events.
also think
So
some of
there is
that
an after.
sounds like some of that narration that sounds retrospective. It might just be his entries in the cookbook. Like I sometimes think like it isn't marked that way, but I think
Sometimes.
he's writing in the cookbook sometimes when we're just getting Carl's narration
Yeah.
out of, but some of
Could
it, you're
be.
right, some of it does seem retrospective.
Just feels that way.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna believe that until proven otherwise. Basically, that's my headcanon.
Yeah.
However,
I'm
we've
right
kind
with
of
you.
got to where we want to go with spoilers, though.
Yeah.
Oh,
We'll need to have some more DC chats, like probably one that's more
I still
focused
have
around
things to say. I mean,
book 7. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite things is at the beginning of every book, and you see this in real life when something massive has happened around the world. The first thing everybody does when things settle down is check in. You see it on Facebook, you see it on Instagram, you see it everywhere. Are you okay? Where are you? And at the beginning of every floor, since they've had this chat feature, they all check in with each other. Where are you? Are you okay? Okay. And they all just like, did they make it? It's the first thing any of them do. They all check on each other. And I love
so
that.
Wonderful. Yeah, the found family is really the heart of the series that makes it so special, I think, is beyond the amazing, main characters, just that overarching sensibility of the found family, and them caring more about, taking care of each other than
it's those connections. It's the characters and the connections that they form that make this worth reading. Everything else is gravy. Ultimately, it's a good story, and it's really funny, and it's very well plotted, and it centers around an amazing cast of characters who work. It's a winner for me for sure.
It is. It's so great. You're right that the other stuff is gravy, and the gravy though is so delicious here. Like the humor, the cleverness, the thematic stuff. Man, I like the surprise plot twists. The little details that you only catch on reread. Like, oh, there's so much. But the character writing here, it's the main course, I think.
It is the heart. It wouldn't work without it. If we weren't attached to them, it wouldn't work. So,
well, I think that's a good spot to wrap up after 3 hours we've been on. I love that. I love a nice, substantial book chat. And Derri, this was just it was a treat for me to be able to gush about DCC.
So much. Thank you so much, honestly.
And your insights are just spectacular. That you engage with these books so deeply and catch just the deepest nuances of in characters and plot details. It's such a treat to be able to chat with you.
I sacrifice other new reads. That's what I just reread the same stuff so I can catch more. And I just go, but I'll just know nothing about all of those books. That's all right. but no, see, I really appreciate the invite because I have been dying to talk.
Oh, this was a blast for me. And if you made it this far in the video, well, thanks for sticking with us. And I hope you enjoyed the chat and are loving DCC. And man, thank you all for joining, and we'll see you later. Bye.
See ya.